Sir, thank you.
Let's call the meeting to order. Mr. Zimmerman, if you want to start with our prayer.
Okay. Stand, all right. Father, we just thank you for this day. Thank you for the break in the weather as we realize that fall is here and winter's coming, and then it will be spring again as life springs anew. Thank you for this group of citizens that are so interested in our government and the community. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Oh, our flag got removed. So, sorry about that. You know what? We got a flag on his cup right there. Hold it.
I'll get us going.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carlos for the save.
Brought to you by Monster Energy.
There you go. All right, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll.
Chairman Brandon Berg.
Here.
Mr. Brandon Henderson Jansenius is online. Mr. Ron Danzy.
Here.
Mr. J.P. Ferrera.
Here.
Mrs. Seal Schoon. Here. Chairman, you have quorum.
Right. Look like staff guidance, your recommendation. I know Brandon can appear via Zoom, but as my understanding, he can't vote on things via Zoom. How does that work?
That is correct, sir.
Brandon can participate, ask questions, but if there's a vote, he just would not be voting.
He can surely share what he would vote if he were here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, but it'll just be 4-0 or 3-1 or whatever.
Right.
Okay, understood. I guess for purposes of Brandon, can he hear us and see us and all that stuff? Okay.
Yes, hear you just fine. See you guys just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking, I guess we need to hear and see. Yeah, we see you, and then the volume was a little bit low, but I think you adjusted it, didn't you?
Yeah, it'll come up as he talks.
Okay, great. All right. We have meeting minutes from last time. Those are in your packages. Where are they? Oh, they're not, okay, they're not in the books, so I have.
They're attached to this. Right?
They're attached to them. All right. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns about the minutes? Moving approved. Second. The one little thing that I saw was just should we put a reflection that today's October 2nd meeting is now being held on number 9 at 8:30 in lieu of 11:30.
Well, at the time the minutes,
Oh, it
at
was.
the time the minutes were done, I think that's the correct time.
Yeah, that was what we said.
I forgot about the timing, thanks.
And then,
All right.
yeah, later on we got it.
Okay. All right. So who motioned? Ron, seconded by JP. I seconded. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So those minutes as approved. We can go into staff reports, and I know, Jonathan, you're going to introduce the League of Cities. Really, really briefly before that, either you or Nevin just want to super briefly share what was shared from us from a material perspective over the last 2 weeks, namely the election schedule and the sort of like city structures of a lot of the proximate cities.
Okay. You got a couple of emails from Caroline and me, but and we have copies if anybody needs them. But the first is Caroline went through and did an analysis of some of the different neighboring cities in Bay County and also in the areas that have strong mayor, city manager form of government, and provided a chart with a link to their charters. So that's just good background information, and we'll work on making sure that you can get that. In other words, if you lose your email, that it'll be available to you. I hadn't talked to Jan about this, but somewhere where you can get access to that, even if you don't have your email. The other one had to do with election dates, and the Panama City and Callaway, right, Panama City Beach and Callaway have changed their election dates from April to November. That's right, you're here. You know exactly. So glad we have our supervisor of elections, Nina, here with us today. And that's in there. Just an observation, and it's not a legal issue, it's just kind of a practical issue. When we are on the Panama City's on the odd number of years. Callaway and Panama City Beach are on even years. So when they shortened their term or lengthened their term, it was just a few months. Here, if we shorten or lengthen, it will be like a year and a half if the city were to do that. And we can talk about it when you come to that at some date in your discussions. But some things can be done by ordinance, and we don't need a charter change. Other things in connection to that, you may want to look at a charter. So we'll talk about that at some future date.
Awesome, thank you. Jonathan, do we have some other staff introductions here that I don't know?
Yes, so Jared Jones is Assistant City Manager, and I've asked him to start sitting in on these because the likelihood of me being able to make every single meeting is a high probability. And so to that end, I just wanted him to be read in alongside myself and Ms. Smith and Mr. Zimmerman. And then Carlos is a fellow in the military, but he's through the FCCMA or ICMA, the International City County Management Association. He's a fellow with us through the end of the year. And then, of course, Ms. Ward, our Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Cowell, Deputy Supervisor of Elections, and then Ms. Smith is one of our Assistant City Attorneys. So,
Appreciate
and
you
then
being here.
Donald, the ever faithful IT guy. So,
Well, I appreciate you guys being here, and I didn't recognize Jared, and then I've never mentioned Ms. Ward, so I appreciate you being here too. So it's an open forum, so comment anytime you feel like it's appropriate. All right, so then Jonathan, are we ready for the League of Cities?
we are, yes, sir. As requested by the board and promised, we got with the Florida League of Cities to kind of provide a presentation to the Charter Review Advisory Board on kind of some of the history behind, charters at the city level. As an aside, there are 411 cities, towns, and villages across the great state of Florida, and then 67 counties. We're privileged today to be joined by Chris Holly, who is the Director of Member Services and Training for the Florida League of Cities. Chris has been with the FLC for 7 years. And prior to that, he spent 10 years with Leon County and their government as over a variety of departments, from management to budget, administration, and tourism. He's a graduate of Florida State University and a lifelong Floridian, having lived in Naples, Live Oak, Shalimar, and again now in Tallahassee. We're also joined by Dr. Robert or Bob Lee. He's associate professor at Florida Gulf Coast University's Master of Public Administration program, where he also serves as the MPA program coordinator. He served as a senior executive in residence at Florida State University and developed a graduate level certificate in local government management at both FSU and FGCU as part of their MPA programs. Before joining the academic world, he worked for almost 30 years in city management as chief appointed official in 3 different forms of government, city manager in Naples and Gulfport. Both were city council and a manager form of government, assistant to the mayor in Lauderhill, which is a strong mayor-council form of government, and then director of administrative services in Bellevue, which is one of Pennsylvania's general council, general manager forms of government. He served on the American Society for Public Administration Executive Committee for many, many years. He is also the executive director of the Center for Florida Local Government Excellence for 15 years, where he's done numerous trainings, webinars, for the FCCMA, which again is the Florida City County Management Association, the Florida Association of City Clerks, and he is an instructor for the Florida League of Cities, what we call the EMO, the IEMO, which is the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials, and also the Association of City Clerks, their Professional Education Academy, and the Florida Association of Special Districts, FASD, and the Special District Management Certification Program. So Dr. Lee has a tremendous amount of experience. He's authored and co-authored numerous articles on Florida local government. He has a BA and an MPA from the University of Pittsburgh and then a DPA from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. So we are very grateful for both Dr. Lee and Mr. Holly for their time with us today. So at this point, I will turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Well, Dr. Lee, the stage is yours. I hope for the committee that you know the League of Cities stands behind the work that you all are doing, and as the association for all of the different cities, towns, and villages across our state, it's important because you're all very unique, very different in how you provide services to your community, and the work that you all are doing is an important part of that process, to do this on a somewhat regular basis. And when we do these presentations, we're fortunate enough to have relationships with folks like Dr. Lee, who share their expertise and can help guide you all to make sure that your charter and the structure for your government fits appropriately the service delivery that you all expect and that your citizens expect. So we're happy to be here. And we've got, from the League's perspective, a host of data, which I know Jonathan talked about. If you're curious about how other municipalities operate or structures, we can help pull that information for you all. And not just this morning, but if you have questions as you work through this process, just know that we are always available to support and make sure that you guys have everything that you need and you feel confident in the decisions that you're making. So again, just gratitude to Dr. Lee, and I'll be here to support in any way that I can.
Okay, I guess it's up to me to start now. First of all, I sincerely consider it an honor to be participating with you all. Most every local government has advisory committees of some sort. Some of them are annually appointed, routine, something that the citizens and developers expect, like planning and zoning boards, code enforcement boards, et cetera. But I think where the city council takes extra care in their appointments is when they're looking at a charter review advisory board. Because as you all know, it doesn't happen very often. Matter of fact, in Panama City, it hasn't happened in a really long time. But even in those cities that do it routinely, it typically will happen maybe every 5 or 10 years. And they just take a look to make sure it's current, it's up to date with state and federal laws and any notable changes locally that should be considered. So my point is, you are a esteemed group. I'm certain that each member of the commission thought very carefully about appointing someone to this committee that they thought would genuinely and objectively have the best interest of the city. So I assume, I don't know any of you, but you have some experience in the city. You've built a reputation and a brand that I think the commissioners feel is going to be very helpful in terms of assisting them in making some decisions ultimately on this charter review process. With that said, I purposely didn't wear a suit jacket today. I honestly have one, but I wanted to keep it informal. I want to keep it relatively brief, at least my comments. I know time is your rarest commodity, and you don't just need to hear me talk. But I do want to focus on certain areas relative to charters and also talk about forms of government, which is probably the crux of what a charter should entail. And then just open up to some Q&A, just some general questions that you all may have that I may humbly be able to address based on my experience and share that with you. So with that said, why don't we go to the next slide? First slide, I should say. And I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Constitution. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the state constitution. And the reason I want to talk about them briefly with you is because that's basically what your city charter is. It's a constitution, only it's referred to as a charter at the local level. I want to talk a little bit about the federal and state constitutions. Because if you look at them, even with all the information contained therein, they're still relatively brief. The U.S. Constitution focuses on legislative powers and the two branches of the legislators, executive powers of the president, judicial. It gets into states' rights and roles, and then it talks about constitutional amendments that are very explicit. And those, for the most part, I think, as we all know, focus on individual rights, whether it's freedom of speech, right to bear arms, search and seizure, et cetera, et cetera. They have to do with, a lot of it has to do with the rights of citizens of the United States. And there's really no reference to local governments therein. Next slide. We get into the state constitution, it's much larger, it's broader. Now, one of the reasons is because it reiterates, in some cases, some of the rights already spelled out at the federal level. Rights that states can't overturn, those are federal rights that every citizen has in the United States. But similarly, it gets into legislative powers and the compositions and the executive level and what's involved and who's involved in the cabinet, the state level. Judicial makeup, talks about elections, finance, and taxations, and not just at the state level, but it gets into local governments. And here's where local governments have requirements, mandates, many cases, thousands in terms of the responsibilities of local governments and understanding various aspects of those statutes. But it gets into details and dictates constraints for local governments. In local governments, I'm talking about counties, municipalities, schools, universities. In this case, they're state-related. Counties, schools, and universities, I would argue, are more creatures of the state because it's very specific in many of the do's and don'ts in terms of their responsibilities. Municipalities are a little bit different. They're, unlike the counties where the state's divided into 67 counties, as previously mentioned, there's about 411 cities, and that changes. 411, 412, 410, it kind of depends on whether a new one is formed or one has been dissolved. But the municipalities are a little bit different because they're voluntary. They're set up. The decision is typically made by local citizens to say, we want to form our own municipality. And by the way, in Florida, when you see the word city or town or village, in Florida, they all mean the same. It's just what the local representatives who were forming that municipality wanted to call themselves. We have cities in Florida that have under 100 people. We have villages that have over 50,000 people. Similarly with towns, it varies in terms of population greatly. So unlike some states where the nomenclature in terms of what you call yourself in local government is dictated in part by population, size of budget, et cetera, that's not the case in Florida. The Constitution also has a number of miscellaneous items, that citizens have initiated and voted on for the most part, such as those pertaining to marijuana, gambling. If I recall, a few years back, there was one about pigs in cages, et cetera. It gets into issues and items that typically you wouldn't think would be part of a constitution. But the bottom line is, in this particular case, the state constitution, again, emphasizes rights of people, talks about the structure, and it does provide guidance and mandates for other levels of government, whether it's counties, municipalities, schools, and universities. And again, it does have those citizen-initiated provisions that are incorporated therein. Next slide. Local governments' constitutions, again, referred to as charters. I already mentioned that counties are more creatures of the state. And in Florida, that's the case because if you look at the makeup of county governments, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I think there's some relevance to understand the connectivity of these different local governments. The county governments have constitutional officers from the state: sheriff, supervisor of election, clerk of courts, And these examples, tax collector, property appraisers, I mean, all counties have people who serve in those capacities. Now, the only difference between charter counties and non-charter counties, and most of them are non-charter, the primary difference is that they can, in some cases, change the title of some of these constitutional offices, which they've done, for example, in Broward County. Doesn't seem to be any real need to do that. But Broward County is, for those who may be familiar with the history of that, it is a little bit different in terms of how they address certain issues politically. It also gives them some authority in terms of taxation with utilities that isn't the case in non-charter counties. Municipal governments, as I think I've already mentioned, the municipal governments of cities, villages, and towns, they all have charters at the local level. At the municipal level, they all have charters. And a very important point to emphasize is that the charter is a legal document. It's not a guide. It's not like this is a Rotary Club or even though HOA rules and regulations are legal documents, sometimes they're viewed as guides too. And with a nod and a wink, they do things a little differently than maybe what their documents provide for. Not the case in local government. Again, there's thousands of different requirements and mandates that must be complied with. And, it is legally mandated, not only criminally, but the governor can remove elected officials from office if they're not doing their job in a way that conflicts with the law. Another critical point is that local charters cannot conflict with the federal and state constitution. Thus, there's no real reason to reiterate the provisions that are provided in the state and federal constitutions. And frankly, even in those statutes at the state and federal level, because local governments can't be in conflict with those requirements. They can't do less than what those provisions, both in the Constitution and the state and federal statutes, provide for. So there's really no need to reiterate that. It may be appropriate at times if you're talking about a topic, i.e. ethics, and even in ordinance and resolution levels at the local level, simply referring to the state statute as your guide may be what's most appropriate, because there can be amendments and changes there as well. And that would prevent you from having to change routinely or amend routinely your own local legislation. Prior to 1968, where there's some major sweeping changes in the Florida Constitution, local governments operated on what was referred to as Dillon's Law. Now, too simply stated, what Dillon's Law provides is that municipalities were only permitted to provide or take steps, make decisions that were explicitly provided for in the Constitution and the statutes provided by the state of Florida. What was happening leading up to this Constitution was a thing called special acts, where the state legislators were having to deal with hundreds a year of special requests by local governments to do something that wasn't explicitly provided in the statute. And wisdom took over here, and the decision was we needed to have more home rule powers at the local level, and which would avoid a lot of these special acts. And basically what it provided was that local municipalities were able to do anything, by law, were allowed to provide any type of service and make any decisions, provided they weren't restricted in the Constitution. And you can see the difference there. One is you have to only provide what services that are explicitly allowed, and the home rule would allow you to do services as long as they weren't explicitly prevented or prohibited. And that's where the home rule powers came in. Now, we all know what has happened subsequently, and I can verify this as a researcher with a guy named Lance DeHaven Smith, who was at Florida State University years ago. We did a paper in 2009 that showed that from 1968 to 2008, that the state legislators imposed 1,950 unfunded mandates on municipalities. So yes, municipalities were given home rule power to do anything that wasn't prohibited in the states by the state. But what happened subsequently then is the state started initiating things, incorporating things in their statutes that provided that additional restriction. So from the standpoint of the legislators, it made it easier for them because they didn't have to deal with all the special acts, but it didn't necessarily make it made it easier for municipalities, but not to the extent one may think because of the number of mandates that have routinely been imposed upon jurisdictions. Next slide. Local charter contents. And this leads me up to what I want to suggest to you in terms of your charter. And I've seen a number of different charters. And the biggest problem I've seen with them is that they've self-constrained their government in areas that they shouldn't be constraining them. I've even seen them to the point where one charter provided that you could only spend up to a certain amount of property tax money on a capital improvement project, and unless it went to the voters for referendum. The problem with that, and where the insight was lacking, was that it basically prohibited the jurisdiction from seeking state and federal grants, some which required a 3 or 4 week turnover. So they wanted to do a capital project, and they could have had a state or federal grant pay 3/4 of it. They were constrained because of the time that it takes and the procedures required in going through a referendum vote. That would be one real glaring example where you don't want to get into those details. You can do that in an ordinance, or you can do that at the resolution level, or some other means at the commission level. But local charters should be limited. Obviously, a preamble and legal description, you want to know where your boundaries are of your jurisdiction. The other key point would be legislative branch. Talk about that. It needs to be clear. Keep it simple. Keep it clear. As Einstein said, keep it simple, but not simpler. In this particular case, you do want to make sure you have the number of officials, what their term of office is. Are they going to be district elected? Or are they going to be at-large elected? I've seen some successfully that must come from a district, but they're elected at large. You also want to include powers and duties and how they may be removed. Powers and duties, by the way, I would also recommend that you keep that relatively broad because I've seen cases. I was actually an expert witness on a case where jurisdiction was being sued because they said they didn't have certain purchasing authority to do certain things. And the interpretation that was made is that if it wasn't in the charter, because they listed a lot of specific, explicit responsibilities, but they didn't list this one. And so what my point is, don't be too specific in terms of explicit, say, basically, these are all the powers that they have. You can say they have powers to govern the city, to include but not be limited to, and then get into certain responsibilities. Should also have a section on your executive, whatever type of executive that is. Same thing, how they're selected, power, duties, how they're removed, basically who they report to. That dictates a large part, your form of government is who your CEO is going to be in your municipality. And by the way, there's a number of charters that may have, for example, a city manager that may have a city manager. They claim to have a city manager form of government, but when you look at the charter and look at the responsibilities and who the manager reports to, that can vary and thus make it no longer a council manager form of government or council commission form of government. And I'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. You also want to talk about legal. Every jurisdiction has legal, in this case, attorneys, board attorneys, municipal attorneys. I wouldn't get too specific there either in terms of types. For example, some have contract with firms, some contracts individuals, some do it in-house, have their own attorney, staff person, some have firms do it or an individual do it under contract. I wouldn't restrict myself as to how you do it. Your job is to see that it gets done, but not to get into too much detail on what particulars are going to be involved in where they're going to evolve from. But you do want to talk about their responsibilities, who they report to, how they're removed, and how they're hired. Similarly with city clerks, they are also a charter position that should be included therein. And like the other two, selection powers, duties, removal. I've seen some real unusual cases where a city clerk is appointed by the city commission, but reports to the city manager, and or vice versa. They're appointed by a city manager and they report to the city commission. That sets itself up for some problems when things aren't going well in a city due to personality changes. I think the authority ought to be clear. And again, I'll get into a little more of that when I talk about different forms of government. And then there ought to be included in your charter, I would suggest, procedures for amendments. How are you going to amend the charter? Anything substantive will require a vote of the citizens. And so, you do want to have that procedure included in there so that particularly if there's going to be a citizen initiative, how that occurs, what percentage of citizens need to sign a statement, for example, of interest. Just a little bit about that process. Next slide. By the way, I'll take a number of questions. I'll be through this not too much longer, but please let's think of some questions that you may have. I want to talk about forms of government, and what I've narrowed it down to is 4 different forms. You may have heard other types of forms of local government, but I would put all of them in a hybrid form category, which we'll be talking about in a bit here as well. Next slide. Let's talk about the commission manager form. This is the most prevalent form of government in the United States, most prevalent form of government in Florida, the form of government that I think 100% of the jurisdictions in Florida between population of 25,000 and 55,000, which is your category, exists. It's a process that's similar to a private corporation. You basically have a board, in this case, a commission, and a CEO, a manager. This form of government is adaptable to legislative variation. So it doesn't matter how many elected officials you have, what their terms of offices are, whether you have a large number, 9-member, 5-member, if you have a small number, 3-member, doesn't matter their terms of office, whether they have term limited or whether they don't have term limited. It's the form that's most adaptable. It's separate from the legislative branch. Professional manager reports to all members of the commission, not just one. So there's really no one political head of the city that can control policy and even controls what should be a professional and objective city manager. It should be collectively. So if they're elected from different parts of the city, the whole city is then represented in terms of policy and guiding that decision relative to who the manager is going to be. With that said, all policy, legislative, and political power will rest with the elected commission as a whole. Another feature about the council manager form is it's an at-will employee. It requires a majority or supermajority of the commission to remove the person, but they can be removed. If a manager starts and has all the best resume and best experience, but it just doesn't seem to be a fit, or maybe things have changed in their life, or their personality has changed, or maybe some health issue occurs. It's just that they don't have the emotional intelligence that you would expect from a professional city manager. The manager can be fired at will. It's not something that's going to take a vote of the citizens. It's not something that, and very often the commission may give this person a due process hearing, but it's not something that necessitates a long drawn out process when things aren't going well. Next slide, please. The second form of government, strong mayor commission form. Typically, very large cities have this form of government. There are a few exceptions, but cities like Dallas has it, and San Antonio, Charlotte, number of bigger cities do have this form of government, but you'll typically find it in a very, very large jurisdictions. In this case, the CEO of a city is elected by the voters. No government or management experience or expertise is required to be eligible. Very often, it's someone with a charismatic personality, and very often someone with some experience in maybe a different sector, maybe the private sector, which in some cases may correlate with the public sector, but in many cases, it does not correlate with the public sector. They would have the power to appoint and remove department heads and all employees, typically in a pure strong mayor commission form of government. So if a new mayor comes in, that means that some staff may be removed, particularly if they were appointed by the mayor, say an assistant to the mayor or administrative staff in the mayor's office, in some cases even key department heads. The mayor does not report to the commission. And here's another difference from the council manager form. The mayor reports directly to the voters. Their agenda may actually be different from that of the commission. Even though the commissioners may pass something, how the mayor implements it, how long the mayor takes to implement it, what comments are made during the implementation that may be against the other commissioners is something that's difficult to control by the commission. Oftentimes, and I'm sharing this with you just from my personal experience, but there are oftentimes with an elected mayor position, there's at least one person on the commission who actually aspires to be the mayor the next go around, the next election. It's just human nature. And as a result, they don't necessarily try to support the mayor in their duties. You may have a very good mayor, but if you have one or two members of the commission who aspire to get in that seat, they don't want to make the mayor look good necessarily. So just something to consider with this form of government. There are some exceptions in terms of large cities, Pensacola and West Palm Beach. But typically in Florida, you're looking at Jacksonville, Duval, actually a consolidated government, county and city, Tampa, St. Pete, Orlando. Those types of cities are typically the ones that you find as strong mayor. There's also, most of the strong mayor forms of government are actually in the very, very small jurisdictions, have 100 people, 200 people. They don't have the means to hire a professional manager. And their service level may be very minimal. It may be that the county is providing most of their services. They may contract out for some other needed services. It's the municipalities, they're not responsible for providing local government services necessarily. They're responsible for seeing that they're provided. So they don't necessarily have to be the provider. They can get contract to see that it's provided. Maybe the sheriff's providing police services, or all utilities are taken care of by the county utility system. Building inspections, maybe that's done by the county or contracted out with some other jurisdiction, larger jurisdiction, et cetera. But so a strong mayor in those particular cases may not have a lot of responsibility that they have to be certain that they're taken care of on behalf of their jurisdiction. Next slide. The rarest form of government, and by the way, strong mayor form is the council managers, many more, probably 2/3 or more council manager forms of government than there are strong mayor forms. This is probably the rarest form, the commission form, for good reason. There's only a few in the state of Florida. In this particular case, believe it or not, the commissioners serve as both legislators and administrators. There's no central coordination, which in Florida is ripe for sunshine law violations. I'm sure you've all been briefed on, even in your particular cases, even advisory boards have to comply with the Florida sunshine law. No two members of the board can speak with each other about an item that could potentially be before you as an advisory board member, except at a public meeting that's been noticed. So in this particular case, if you can picture a commission, each one having a title of one's a public safety director, one's a finance director, one's a public works director. They're not supposed to talk to each other between their monthly or bi-monthly meetings, except at a publicly noticed meeting. And the reality is that just doesn't happen. It's like a poorly run condo association I refer to here, where there's no expertise required, and state mandates make it very, very difficult. Even people, the best of people, with the best intentions, to think that they're going to be managing a city that when they can't talk with each other about items that could potentially be before them when they're wearing the hat of a city commissioner or city council member. Next slide. Hybrid forms of government, and this would make up kind of the rest of the types of forms of government that exist. For example, a mayor appoints the city manager with approval of the commission, or the mayor has responsibility for just the police department only, or only supervises the city clerk. It creates a very confusing structure, usually, for city officials. It can create some conflict among some commissioners, the mayor, manager, city clerk, because it's not a clear chain of command. It's also confusing to the structure for citizens who have certain expectations for city titles. If they come from a council manager form of government and you have a title of city manager, they think certain expectations go with that. Now, similarly, if they come from a large city with a mayor as a title, and they come to a professionally managed city manager of a city the size of Panama City, they may have certain expectations of the mayor that are not correct. But that's something that at the local level and at the level of this size government, that's much easier to explain, much easier to show at your meetings how that works and describe to people who may be confused about how much authority a mayor has. In a council manager form of government, a mayor has a significant responsibility. Typically they chair the meetings of the commission, all the meetings. They serve as the figurehead of the city from a political perspective. They can state the message representing the commissioners. There are times when the commissioners may delegate some responsibility to the mayor. For example, if there's an annexation, let's say your city wants to annex some property in a county. It may be that the council designates the mayor to negotiate with the chair of the county commissioner on service levels, along with having the managers of those respective jurisdictions part of that. But in that particular case, that would be a sunshine law issue too, because they delegated their responsibility. But my point is, it can be confusing with these titles to people. And my advice is to keep it simple, keep it orally, so the structure is clear to everybody, and make so that the expectations as to what they're to do and is cleaner. And it also provides that probably the most significant point I'll say about forms of government is it should be set up for when things aren't going well. As human beings, creatures of emotion, bristled with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity, as Dale Carnegie would say, we're human beings. And it's not if, it's when a member of the council is upset with another member of the commission, commission upset with another member of the commission, or the mayor gets upset with someone on the commission, or vice versa, or with staff. The question is, what form is going to right the ship the best, the easiest. If you have a rogue mayor who's elected for 2 years, or in many cases, in most cases, I would argue they're elected for 4 years. But if it's 2 years or 4 years, you have to wait 2 to 4 years before you can replace that person. Council manager, form of government, that's not the case. They can be removed promptly if needed, and that's just based on the majority of what the commission feels. So pros and cons, but for your particular case, think in terms of structure, what would be the best form that's going to be most understandable and that's going to be able to right the ship when personalities get involved and try power moves that us human beings end up doing because of egos and other reasons. Next slide. Key takeaways. City charter is a legal document that should be limited in scope. Charter Review Advisory Board, the Charter Review Advisory Board, I think that's your title, that's what I'm calling you, may refer to other non-charter issues in a separate memo to the commission for future ordinance resolution consideration. What I mean here is, and I touched on it just very, very briefly before, you're going to listen to people who are going to give you some advice as to what should be in the charter, or some issues that the city has and it needs to be addressed. And it may very, very well be a very valid issue, and rightly so, needs to be addressed. The question is, where should it be addressed, or how should it be addressed? Generally, it shouldn't be part of the charter. What I would suggest to you as a Charter Review Advisory Board is that you separate those items that should be in the charter from those items that shouldn't be, that may come up, and have a separate memorandum. You have one recommendation memorandum to the City Commission in terms of what changes should be included in the charter. You should have another one that says, and oh, by the way, during our deliberations, we found a few other issues that we thought that were paramount in terms of the success of our city. And we would like the city commissioners to consider those on your agenda in the future. It seems overwhelmingly that these are important, or at least a consensus of our group feel they are. And then just itemize what those are. So you're not ignoring those issues. You're just not inadvertently putting them or inadvertently putting them into a charter where they shouldn't be. Second key takeaway is the form of government provided in the charter should enable the city to respond best when political conflict exists, because it will exist. It's just, again, that's who we are as human beings for too numerous reasons to mention. And then third, from my experience working with each of these forms of government, actually, except for the commission form, the commission manager form generally provides the best foundation in times of political conflict. It's the best structure to ensure professional, objective management. 70% of the managers have Masters of Public Administration. They belong to an International City and County Managers Association that has a strong code of ethics that they must comply with to be a member. As a matter of fact, if they're found to be in violation of those codes of ethics, not only can the commissioners obviously take their action against the city manager, but so too will the professional association. There's been numerous cases where not only do they remove them from their membership and censor them, but they will take out they'll take a local ad in the regional newspaper where the manager exists, censoring the manager. They take ethics very, very as the crux of the foundation of what they do as a profession. It's not a profession for everybody, and you have to be one who likes to do something different every day, likes to be a person who has to make all the elected officials satisfied. Any of those out there who say they need to make 3 of the 5 happy are really looking at this in a way that's destined for their failure. They need to make all 5 happy the best they can. And they need to treat them all the same. And that's what the structure does. That's what it promotes in terms of the professional association. It's also the form, I would argue, that's most likely to maintain compliance with state and federal laws. because you're dealing with a professional person who understands public personnel administration, who understands public finance. I mean, there are 11 different fund types in the public sector, and you have to know how each of those work. You have to know the constraints of each of those fund types. You have to know what revenues go in, what revenues don't, what kind of expenditures can evolve from those. And finance directors, you can't always rely on. Finance directors are like city managers, like attorneys. 50% of them finish in the bottom half of their class. And so sometimes you can get someone who may not be as apt. Some of them have 20 years experience, 1 year repeated 20 times. Things are change every single year, and this form of government is the one that I would argue is most likely to help with complying with these state and federal laws that are always changing as well. And finally, it provides a check and balance in terms of administration and politics. Again, you could have a very charismatic mayor, and actually, if everyone's getting along well, take a leadership role and really push an agenda quite successfully. The problem is, or the misunderstanding is, a mayor cannot skirt around mandates and laws and policies, procedures that are set up any quicker than a city manager can. They still, if they do, or if they try to do so, then it opens up an ethical problem or scandal. And even the smallest things, scandals are nothing more than an evolution of predictable and preventable events, as they say. So you want to make sure that you have that check and balance the best you can from administration and politics in terms of the day-to-day operations of the city. It also helps the city employees know that they don't have to worry about what's going on politically. They need to worry about doing their job and what's expected of them from their administrator. So with that, I think the next slide is just some Q&A. Be happy to address any questions you may have.
I mean, Dr. Lee, I really appreciate that. That's very, very helpful. I mean, my biggest question is there any sort of system where basically the city commission delegates all of their authority to like an advisory board that then kind of rules with an iron fist? No way.
Are you being facetious, or is that a serious question, or what?
Questions?
Oh, no, that they don't delegate. They can't delegate their authority. They've raised their hand, and
Power gets vested in a charter review advisory board. That is.
It's facetious,
Yes,
Doctor.
sorry, Dr. Lee.
that's what I thought. I paused. I take with great deal of respect any question. So.
Speak freely, guys. Yeah.
So you emphasize that the charter is a legal document. Is it required to be filed with the Division of Department of State, like a, corporation?
Yeah, I think I'll leave up. One of the things that I always advise people is not to take advice from some carpetbagger, some presenter, someone else's attorney. Take it from your own attorney. So I'll defer that to your board attorney.
But the charter is filed with the Department of State.
Okay, but just like a corporate bylaws.
Well, I don't know if it's just like that, but it's over there.
There are not even more than scores of different documents and filings that local governments have to submit to the state and the various departments of the state beyond just a charter. So yes, there are a lot of. That's a really good question. That is a responsibility, and it's timely as to how those filings occur.
It doesn't require an annual report like corporations. The president, everybody's saying, you have to name all the people.
Annual comprehensive financial report.
Financial, but
Annual comprehensive financial report.
but what about who are the players?
They're in there.
Okay.
Everything's in there.
That might be interesting for you to get it's on our website, but it's called.
I meant to bring it today, but
Yeah.
we had a little kerfuffle this morning, so
Okay,
I didn't get it up here.
Yeah, that would be.
But I'll bring it to the next meeting.
Send them a
I
link.
did send them
Yeah,
I did send them a link to it.
Yeah, we
I'll-
got a copy of that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But I'll bring hard copies for anybody who would like to.
What was it? I saw a very detailed report. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I did look through that, but
I recommended looking at the,
yes, I looked,
transmittal letter and the management discussion and analysis, right?
but I mean, I kind of glanced through the rest of it and it's a little bit overwhelming.
Yes, it's very intense.
Yeah, because corporations have a very simple report that just anybody could just click on it. You know, the president, treasurer, you know, if there's a problem, you know, this is the resident agent, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because the document that you attach, you know, is very cumbersome. I mean, the average person wouldn't be able to. I was just curious.
Do you have a question?
Dr. Lee, just your opinion. Sometimes commissioners get elected with a strong manager type of government and they don't think they have any power. What was your opinion on how to answer that?
Well, I don't know the particulars of what they're referring to, but one of the things that happens sometimes, I'll give you a couple of scenarios, is that the city's running so well. The manager and the commissioners have a good working relationship, both individually and collectively. And they trust the manager and the manager trusts them. The manager surrounds themselves with some really good people, professional people. And when they make submittals for agenda items, very often it's 5-0 votes, 5-0 votes, 5-0 votes. And people think, well, golly, they're just a rubber stamp. They don't see what goes on behind the scenes. And so they think they don't have the power. They do have the power. And there's some, when they have a good relationship, I know when I was a city manager, I'd have commissioners that would come to me individually and say, Bob, this item that's on the agenda that you're recommending, actually, I'm going to be, I can't vote for it. I have to vote against it. And I would say 100% of the time they had good reason for it. So I appreciated that. They didn't embarrass me at the meeting. Rather, what I would do is commend them for their point of view and sometimes even change my perspective if I thought that makes sense. But the citizens would see that, you know, this isn't a rubber stamp, that there's good reason for what's being done. But strong manager is responsible for the day-to-day operations, the commission, and you can do this in annual workshops. You could have a workshop, the commissioners could meet. Matter of fact, I would advocate for it, to talk about what their roles are, what their roles aren't, to talk about, how they can do things better. Same with the manager, talk about the Sunshine Law again, talk about ethics, even though they may already have had it. And let the citizens see that transparently. Let them see that training. Let them be part of it. I also think sometimes void on a lot of websites are the clear expectations of what these responsibilities are. So if people go to the website, they can see, well, in my form of government, they don't have to search for the charter in some mini code document that has the code of ordinances, et cetera. I mean, that could be part of what's on your website, but it should be very clear, notably, who has responsibility for what, and maybe even why and how it's celebrated. But perceptions, you're going to be dealing with those all the time, and misunderstandings. And again, many of these people may be from other jurisdictions, and they're used to seeing their commissioners do this or that. One final point I could tell you is that in some jurisdictions, even though they have a clear charter, clear set of responsibilities, a strong personality on the commission can sort of take over sometimes, and the other members may be receptive to that, or more laissez-faire about the whole idea of this one commissioner or the mayor getting their way. And what eventually evolves into is a form of government that's different than what the charter provides. You may even have a city manager that's very weak from the standpoint of wanting to make everybody happy, particularly that strong personality, and relinquish some authority and responsibility to that strong mayor. Well, not officially strong, but strong personality. And that's how the jurisdiction starts to operate. And that's how people think it's actually does operate. So in those particular cases where you now want to right the ship, it may be difficult because you haven't been following your charter. So there's many, many ways that there could be a misunderstanding in terms of who has the power in a city. But clearly in a council manager form, the power, political and otherwise, rests with the commissioners because they're the ultimate say. They could fire the manager at whim.
So one thing I want to add to that, and that's a really good question. If I can restate the question, what do you do when you have a strong manager and the elected officials don't feel like they have the power? One quick correction is there is no strong manager form of government. You have a manager with an elected body. And what we educate our newly elected officials on is predominantly most people will come when they run for office. They've come from some private sector or experience where we ask them in the room, have you worked for a business? Do you run a business? And they are decision makers, right? They've gotten into this position because they know how to solve problems. They know how to get things done. And when they own or operate their own business or in a management position, when they want to get something done, they are the lone decision maker and they take that priority forward and they get something done. Well, now you are one of 5 or 7 or 6, and they may actually feel like they don't have power. But what they have to realize is now they have to build a consensus before anything can be done. And that's hard to get through. And the manager's job and the staff, if that is the form of government that we're discussing right now, is just to provide information and recommendations on what the impacts of a particular policy position might be. And then it's up to that body to discuss and to build a consensus. And that's something that from the Florida League of Cities perspective, when we're teaching newly elected officials, we teach them how to build that consensus, how to debate the posture, what the position of somebody is, not the motive of their recommendation on something. Like, let's talk about policy. Now, you may get into a different position if you have a different form of government that's being discussed because that power dynamic can shift. But Bob made a couple of really good points about strong personalities and weak personalities because that's very important. But again, elections can change the dynamic of that power on a somewhat regular basis. And that's something that I wanted to bring up at kind of the end of Bob's presentation is think about the decisions that you all are making and how this will set Panama City up for the future. And I know Bob talked about, political, you ride the waves, right? It's not always rainbows and sunshine, but how will this look in 10 or 15 or 20 years whenever the next review is? Are you looking at the districts and the representation of your elected officials, how that structure will be, and will it match potentially the growth of your community? Do you feel like everyone is represented well? Do you think the power dynamic, are there the appropriate checks and balances in place? Like, those are the big, picture discussions that I hope that your body will consider.
Just add one other quick footnote, if I may, because they're all different personalities that will change. But a manager, it is a balance that they have to reach, where they have to, some commissions expect recommendations from the manager. Other commissioners, and what's been the culture is that the manager submits alternatives but doesn't make recommendations. I've seen the two extremes, and when you have setups like that, that can sort of be perceived as power one way versus another. But you also need to look at what the unintended consequences are of the alternative. Where you have maybe a strong mayor who is elected by the people, doesn't report to the commission. For those commissioners who think they have less authority now because they have to work together with other commissioners, they now have a double challenge. They have to work with other commissioners and an elected mayor who doesn't report to them. So it's a not an easy thing to do. Managing a local government, you're the last provider of services. You can't delegate like the state and the federal government can. Local governments are the last provider of services. So anyways, I'll stop there, and I don't know if that helped with your question, or if there's any follow-up, be happy to try to address it.
I have sort of a follow-up what Mr. Hawley was talking about with the power dynamic. In either of your experience, have you seen any city charter successfully codify sort of size of apportionment when it comes to their elected positions?
Can you clarify that when you say size of apportionment?
I mean, apportionment in terms of the number of voters to their commission seats. And sort of
Looking at changing districts?
correct, right, or the number of districts without having to do it in the charter, where this would be sort of an automatic procedure that would be set up past a certain apportionment number with a census.
Well, like no one represents more than 10,000 people,
Correct.
something like that.
Yes, to where you wouldn't have to amend the charter to do that, that the city commission could, if that threshold is hit, they would begin a process that would create a new commission seat.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to guide you with that. I have not seen that. I understand it's a great question, but particularly where there's growth or rapid growth in certain areas.
Or annexation.
Or annexations too. And if you are one of those jurisdictions that does annexations, that's what would be ripe for consideration in terms of if you're set up by districts. Again, there's a number of jurisdictions that they don't have districts. They elect at large at the local level. The one difference between the state and federal elections and the local elections in Florida is that Florida local governments don't run by party in terms of the local governments. In other words, I'm not running as a Democrat, I'm not running as a Republican. You may be, but you're not. But that's a real good question, but I think that would take something that would involve a little more research.
Thank you.
So you touched on this and help me with the terminology here, guys, but we have single member districts where the district votes for their own representative or board, right? And then I know we have at large, but is that the predominant way of doing things, or are there other systems where all of the city elects the people that have to live in that ward? Like that's the way Bay County does it, is I think everybody votes on the county commissioner, but they have to live in that ward or district, whatever. How does that work? The pros and cons?
Well, okay, it varies, and state some of the differences in pros and cons. Some jurisdictions, again, size has a lot to do with it. You'll see typically in very large jurisdictions, they will have commissioners elected by district and by just the voters within that district. And then what they typically would do, if they're going to do that, they'll want to make sure the con of that is that people are just representing their district. They're not looking citywide at what's best interest for the city. So typically you'll see in a charter a couple members on the commission in those particular cases would be elected at large, so that there's at least the argument is there's some balance. What I've seen in smaller or medium-sized jurisdictions is that medium-sized jurisdictions, well, let's say the size of Panama City, is that they could still have districts, and you must come from those districts. But in some cases, I've seen where they all must be elected citywide, as opposed to just they represent their district. They are. It ensures that not all the commissioners are from one part of the city. Maybe a more affluent part, or a part where there's most campaign contributions, or seems to be more networking done, et cetera, et cetera. It does ensure that there's some representation, but that everybody needs to look at the city as a whole. And then I've seen where they've been just elected citywide. I've seen where they've had it where the top 5 vote getters become, or the top 3, if they're going to be staggering terms, or top 2, become the elected officials, which I don't know if that necessarily makes sense, but pros and cons, I think the pro of whatever you put together, you want to make sure that the city is represented citywide, the representatives on the commission are represented. So I like the idea of districts, but you need to build in some assurance that some members of the commission also are elected citywide, so that you have that balance. At least that's what that some jurisdictions do. I don't know what the percentages are, but and sometimes and very often it's the mayor that is elected citywide. Matter of fact, most always, and that seems to be the idea of being the balancing. They chair the meeting. They have four other people who each represent a different district, and it tends to the mayor is typically the deciding vote, and that tends to give the balance that you need of making sure everyone's represented, the areas of the city, at the same time that there's citywide consideration in terms of policy. One other final point is some would argue that, well, this is some gamesmanship here in that if we all represent our own districts, we may not get things done unless we're willing to support this district or this other district so that they'll also support me, that type of thing. I would hope that the structure could be set up so that there's not so much of that, but rather they're making decisions based on what's best for their district and what's best citywide.
So for the other board members, I have a ton of questions. So if I'm going too far, just please stop me. Just kind of real quick answer here. Have you seen any commissions that elect their own mayor where like the mayor is?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just about, when you were getting into that, Bob, I was thinking about there are a variety of ways of how the mayor can be selected.
Yeah.
It can be voted at large. It can be a rotating seat amongst the commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
It can be voted on by the commissioners. They can select their own mayor.
Yeah.
It's up to the body. And I mean, you can definitely include that in your charter.
Intellectual exercise for me because our county has county commissioners and then they elect their chairperson that serves as the chair of the county. And I guess that's effectively like the mayor of the county, although it doesn't carry the same weight as being mayor of a city. I was just curious.
Yeah.
That's a real good question. There are some who have a president of council. The mayor is completely ceremonial, doesn't have a vote. They call weak mayor commission form of government. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the dynamic between the commission and the manager. What about the dynamic between the commission and the citizens? What do you see as far as limitations on commission authority that needs to go to like a citizen vote, whether it's spending or decisions or any sort of parameters that works, doesn't work? I think Dr. Lee said something very early on about a city that had some spending parameter on ad valorem that kind of made everything clunky. So are there things that go in charters that are typically saying, hey, commissioners, you have this degree of authority, except for these things need to get approved by the citizens?
Yeah, I don't advocate that. I think that if the commission is not doing their job, you vote them out. There probably could be. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's some other than the example I gave. That, of course, that one wasn't a good one, but where they've self-constrained themselves. In terms of maybe debt or something, the amount of debt that they might want to get into. I just don't like the idea of, because to change it, if it isn't working out, or if it's creating all kinds of other unintended problems, then you have to go to the citizens. And anytime you have to go to the citizens to say, oh, by the way, we've constrained ourselves, but we want you to give us more power, more authority, more discretion, it becomes difficult to put that cat back in a bag.
Yeah, I mean, those are the types of things that you put in your policies and procedures or ordinance. I mean, it's not just being nimble enough, especially in a state with natural disasters like we have, just makes things a little bit more challenging.
As our city is growing, and this is also kind of a question for Nevin, how does annexation, growth, consideration of new citizens, what ward they go in, how do lines get drawn? How does that work?
Okay. Every so often, 10 years kind of after you have your bicentennial or whatever it's called.
Census.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. Census. You look and see what your population is by ward. And Caroline helped us and worked with the supervisor of elections office on this. But is the goal to be within 95% or 5% variance?
5% of the average, plus or minus, so you have to be within 10%.
Yeah.
Each ward needs to be within 5% of the average.
So that's the goal. And so there was a redistricting earlier, was it this year or last year?
21, 22.
22.
Was it?
It's
Oh, was that long ago?
Yeah.
Okay, it was in 22, that's right. It was in 2022. I gotta wake up, I gotta get some more coffee. And there was a redistricting to even up population.
So like Panama City North switched from Ward 2 to Ward 3 as a result of that. So who makes that decision, like where those lines go?
The city commission.
Okay, they draw their own lines.
Yes, I mean, we consult with the supervisor of elections, but it's ultimately the city commission decision.
And it's important to note that, because it's the way our districts are right now, or wards, they may be more balanced population-wise, because that includes even our little kiddos, as part of the census. But they may not be balanced voter-wise, which they're really not, if you look at them. So it's very interesting. So
Where can we look at those? Get that information?
Ms. Ward and her team can provide that data for you.
Yeah, but I guess it's the average voting age for the wards. Is that what we're
Is
asking?
that for eligible voter per ward?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can give you active voters per one.
The point I'm making, though, is that the census is not driven by voters, it's driven by population, because even our kiddos are included in that. So,
And when this was done in 2022,
correct.
everyone thought that there was going to be growth in Panama City North, and there is growth is happening in Panama City North, which will change Ward 3 as far as how that goes.
The last thing I got here is it pretty typical that a city commission, I guess, who are they typically responsible for hiring? I mean, assuming you've got a manager or administrator, whatever, they're always going to hire that position. And then you've got clerk and attorney, and that's pretty consistent across the board.
Yes.
And then how about does it typically funnel out from there? Does the org chart vary from there? Does everybody roll up evenly amongst the three, or walk me through that?
Typically, with
Go ahead,
clerks,
Bob.
about, nearly 50% of the clerks actually report to a city manager or a mayor, strong mayor. But I would say a little more than 50%, the majority report to the commission, along with the city attorney and the city manager. And the org chart from there is basically the CEO, which is the city manager. So your department heads will report to the manager. And then there's just like a typical hierarchy. Reporting to those department heads would be managers and staff. But the attorney typically is responsible for his or her legal staff, and the clerk is typically responsible for his or her administrative staff, typically.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one question. One of the things that we've been discussing over the last 18 to 24 months is shifting our elections from the spring of the odd year to aligning with both the gubernatorial and the presidential election cycles. Considering all 411 cities, towns, and villages across our state, do you have any idea of where the majority of the cities, towns, and villages hold their elections? Are they in the springs of either an odd or even year, or do the majority seem to align with the, kind of the August, November gubernatorial and presidential primaries and elections, more alignment with the state and federal stuff?
So, Jonathan, we do have that data that we can provide, but anecdotally, I can tell you that our largest changes in elected officials are in the November timeframe. But the second largest time period is that spring, is that March. So some still do hold their elections in the spring, but there is a significant portion of those in November. And it would not shock you, there are some sprinkled throughout the year in different time periods. So it really just depends on, when their voters are home, if they're snowbirds or something like that and they come and go. But yeah, I've got a lot of that data that I can give you. And if you're interested in it by region or by population or anything like that, we can kind of break that down for you.
So that actually has another question. What do you normally see as far as plurality wins, runoff procedures? How do people handle those?
I think that's a supervisor of election question. I don't know if that's for.
Some cities are elected on plurality. Some cities you have to have 50% plus one. So
Yeah, I think the chairman was asking across the state, not specifically in Miss Ward's county of Bay County. Correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I mean, we have a system now where you have to get 50% plus one, and if you don't, then we have a runoff. Whereas I've heard other people just say, no, plurality wins, go from there. I've heard other people say we're going to basically have almost like a nonpartisan primary, and then whoever's in the top two, if there's only two, it's only two, but if who's ever in the top two, then they get elected at whatever that election date is. I'm just kind of curious what the sample across the state looks like.
Yeah, I'm going to defer, Chris, in terms of the statistics on that. You're absolutely right. It does vary. I think that's probably the most significant part of what I could contribute is it does vary. The jurisdictions that I've worked with and been associated with, it's been the 50 plus one, but it does vary.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for you on that. That's not a level of detail that we've gotten into with our members, but I don't know if that would be someone that we would have to survey supervisor of elections across the state, or we'd have to survey clerks across the state to look at their charters or get into some Unicode, but it's a good question.
Just to add a little bit, currently 4 of our cities in Bay County have runoffs, and then the other 3 don't. So,
Brandon, what do you got? I know you have good stuff.
Yeah, I was just about to ask if any of you guys got a chance to participate, get out and engage citizens or voters on any of this stuff. I did a poll on social media, and I interviewed about 50 people myself, specifically on the commission structure. So I'll share with you, I had 61 participants in the Facebook poll, all local Facebook groups, and 75% of them asked that we keep the 4-ward commission structure with the one at-large mayor. One person said something, I know, Brandon, you had mentioned about the at-large where the mayor's chosen via the commissioners. One person voted for that. The second highest poll was an all at-large commissioner. So every voter elects all seats, including the mayor's. And that one engaged a lot of different discussions. Ward 2 specifically said, we don't want to do that. We don't feel that we would get fair representation for our ward. We feel that it would be a popularity contest, which...
Well, Brandon, let's do this. Do you have any questions for Dr. Lee or Mr. Hawley? Because
no questions.
Discussion part.
Yeah, very informative. I definitely appreciated their engagement, their presentation.
Cecile, what do you got?
I'm just trying to absorb everything. It's been very, very helpful.
Ron? Okay, you served on, effectively a strong mayor board, right? I mean, that's if you're going to define the school board as something. So I'm kind of curious if you have anything else for them. We'll discuss your feelings at some point, but shortly here. But anything else for them?
Yeah, I'm good.
JP?
Thank you again.
Anything from staff? Guys, I appreciate the time that y'all put into preparing this. I don't know if this was a bespoke presentation for us, but it was incredibly informative. It got us up to speed very quickly on some pretty interesting concepts. And thank you guys for attending.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good luck. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thanks for your service too to the city.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, may we have like a 5-minute break?
Yeah, of course. Let's do that. Yeah. We'll I second here. Come back in 10 minutes.
Second.
Yeah.
Got some restrooms down that hallway.
Neurology used to be. I got your questions, Cecile. Staff, anything else report wise?
You had asked them on our behalf to give us some examples or ideas about how to do outreach.
I did. That's great. Okay. Yeah. Any feedback on that? Jonathan, or maybe Jan was going to look at it.
I don't know where she go.
Yeah. It was in the
It wasn't.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
We had talked a little bit about doing, and you had some really good ideas off the top of your head, like having 2 or 3 planned outreach events with the citizens so that they would give us their inputs and also, be more willing to vote for whatever we come up with if they participate. And so we were going into the weeds and then the request was to have staff come back to us with some ideas, proposals.
Right. So all I would say, I think it's premature to have that right now. I think you guys are still trying to figure out things, but it's very simple. We just need to plan like a town hall, very similar to what we do on Saturday morning. That's the very best way to do it. We can host it in the rotunda, and really it's just a matter of scheduling it, honestly. So I don't know if you maybe look to do the first one in November after you maybe have tackled a few of the chapters or sections. And then we look at maybe doing one in December and then maybe one in January. We're talking about like a town hall with the public. So
Yeah, I think
that's just a matter of y'all saying we're ready to do it and we can get it scheduled in the New York Minute.
The commission does their town hall meetings once a month on Saturday morning in the rotunda.
We have one this Saturday.
And you have it so people can participate digitally.
Oh,
No, we stream it live, but folks can come and do it, and we put it we stream it. I don't know that do we record it, Donald?
Well, it's recorded to YouTube when it's streamed.
Yeah.
So yes, it's streamed
Yeah,
and
so
recorded.
we record it and post it, but yeah, no, it's not it's in the rotunda, so it's not really in a room like this. It's very open. It's right off the first floor. You just come in and so people engage at that point. So yeah.
One of my concerns is some people really don't have transportation or they're disabled. They're not able to move around. Some of my friends, we can barely get them out of the house, to come and visit because they're just elderly and they just want to be there, but they're very interested in what's going on.
Yeah.
So can we have it just like Brandon's participating now? Just make it so people can participate.
So what I would say is, it's the town hall really is to hear feedback. It's not really a matter of, the town hall's not to let people know what's going on. It's the opposite. It's for them to raise concern. My meeting, the first Monday of every month, the Monday morning with the manager, that's when I kind of share everything that's going on, and that is interactive, just like this.
so
People can get on there and ask questions. I usually have people in the room and people online, and they can ask questions about specifically what's going on and what we're doing and why we're doing things the way we're doing and what's coming around the corner. The town hall is just really to give ideas to the commission. That's the purpose of the town hall. And I would think it'd be very similar with y'all in the sense that you're wanting feedback from them.
So, but that other type of meeting, I guess, is logistically possible.
If it's here.
It's here.
Yeah.
Like when room 10 gets rebuilt, it could be done down there.
Correct.
Can it not be virtual only? You can't just do a Zoom meeting announcement and everybody's in front of their computers?
I think we should do a hybrid.
That's fine too, yeah.
Yeah, I just think, people, like for us getting together, we could all just be meeting distantly, but there's something about seeing people's face, where, you really have a sense of people listening or not listening, they're on their phone, whatever. You pick up a lot more when you're physically together, and I would want that for the citizens. I would even like to consider, I like the idea of people coming into the space of the city. It's, beautiful building. It's been spent a lot of money renovating, making it nice. And I know I've enjoyed coming to events, in the rotunda, different events. And so I think we should do that. But I think we should also possibly consider going into the community, finding a space that's not just in the city. My feelings.
Yeah, 100%. And so let's decide if we want to pull the trigger on that at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
And then it starts somewhere, right?
Yeah, I think we should start here, it's easier, and then think a little bit about it going into the community.
Yeah, so, but I'll just be clear, you're kind of doing that with this meeting now. This link was published, so anybody could be watching this meeting right now, not just Mr. Henderson. And there's a public comment section. It's the next item on the agenda. And so you're kind of doing that right now. And so if they're able to make another, I mean, this kind of, the public comment section in this format is kind of like a virtual town hall. Because anybody, someone from Alaska could be on this call right now and give y'all their opinion on this process during audience participation.
They could call in today.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm interested in reaching out to people who don't normally look at the notices, don't even know where to look for a notice. You know, I'm trying to broaden the type of person who works and deals with this. You know what I mean? It's like the notice that was published, there are certain people that know to look for that notice. So I'm looking for a situation, this is what my vision is for the city, for us to do more advertisement, like put it on the radio, and, you know, like, if we have Facebook, which I'm not Facebook literate, I don't do any of that stuff, but social media, you know, some kind of thing where it's a little bit more, you know, publicized.
So this is put on social media, this is put on Facebook, this is put on our email newsletter, this is put on text alert, website,
Bay County.
Bay County's notice page. So if y'all said, Jonathan, we want to do another, we want to do a virtual workshop, which is just, or a virtual town hall, where no agenda, just that, I mean, we would notice it all the same way. So.
Right. The notice wouldn't change. We don't have any budget to put anything on the radio. That costs money. And the commission has not granted the Charter Review Advisory Board any budget to work with. So I don't know how we could get around that. I mean, I suppose we could ask the commission.
Well, we could appeal to the radio stations for like public service announcement.
Yeah.
I will tell you, like, what we're doing on social media, we gain more traction with that than we would with PSAs from the radio stations.
And the TVs.
Yeah, I mean, but again, we've seen our social media be much more effective.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, there is a physical limitation of what we can do at some of the locations outside of City Hall, like your camera equipment, your audio visual is going to be a little bit more difficult. It'll be microphones and webcams versus, you know, the cameras and audio video stuff you have available here. But to that end, I mean, there's a couple of fire stations, there's some clubhouses, there's some other areas that we can do, but it'll take a heavy lift from our IT support team. Just not that it's not possible, I just want you to know. But yeah, as far as publicizing,
We cast a pretty wide net.
we really do. The text alerts, everybody that's got a water account gets them. So if you've got your cell phone number listed on your water account, you're getting text alerts for this, for boil water notices, for a variety of things. So that's about 17,000 accounts that are getting those.
Okay. Well,
We could advertise the meetings on the water utility bills, the dates of these meetings, because they're already set, so.
they're already getting mailed out.
Right.
Yeah, things like that. And, you know, just a communication to different community organizations. I don't know, Caroline is still with the women's club, but like the women's club, you know, there's one on the beach and there's one right in the cove. Things like that, you know, Rotary, yeah, I know it sounds like you're doing a really good job, but my desire is to still like go beyond the standard thing and just sort of tweak the interest of a lot of people. And I know that there are a lot of organizations, you know, Kiwanis, Optimist Club, different organizations where people are generally, you know, paying attention to what's happening around, but they may not know to look for these things. So that's what I'm talking about, the churches, different groups.
And we also did get the email address specific for the Charter Review Advisory Board. I have requested that be dispersed by the public information officer, the city's public. I don't know where she is with that. I haven't followed up. But we could also add that to the community announcements at the commission meetings. Maybe put that on the utility bills as well.
Well, I mean,
email
I'm trying to
address.
think of an easy way to do this. Cecile, would you be open to, sounds like partnering up with the commission to do this at a town hall is a pretty light lift. So if maybe not, you said you have on this Saturday?
I don't know that I would partner. I mean, I don't know how conflating two boards if that would be an issue, Ms. Smith or Mr. Zimmerman, but
Okay.
I would say do
Notice
a-
properly.
it would be up to the mayor and the commissioners. I would suggest we do a separate one.
Yeah, I think a separate one is probably a good idea too. But I was also thinking you were saying that we don't normally take questions, we're usually telling people what's going on in the forum, but, right?
No, I'm sorry, the opposite. So at a town hall, that is for the citizens. So this Saturday morning, the 5 elected officials, we sit down with me and they're like, what do y'all want to tell us and ask us? The city manager, Monday morning with the manager, it's both. I give an update of everything that's going on predominantly for that month. And then at the end, I open it up to questions for both people online and in the room.
I think the secondary format would be better, because when you talk to people about the charter, they're kind of going, they know it's important, but they don't know what it is. I mean, I myself had looked at charters for various reasons over the last few years, but I'm getting a much better generalized foundational understanding, with the lecture we had this morning and just conversation. So I'm like, hey, I'm a lawyer and I've been dealing with it a little bit, and I still felt like, oh, let me see what's happening. So I'm extrapolating to the person who's a non-lawyer, busy with their lives. I feel like it's incumbent upon us to educate a little bit and then receive.
Well, there's going to be a little bit of trial and error, right? I mean, maybe some meetings are going to be very well attended, some possibly are not. That's why the idea of doing something that's low cost or no cost, to just time. Would you prefer to do it on the weekend or a weekday? Or from your meeting?
Can I butt in real quick?
Weekday.
I have a quick idea. So can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. So this board being so new, a lot of people do not know what the charter is. I don't think that the participation that we have in our brains is realistic currently until we get some substance beneath the board. So Brandon, you'd mentioned partnering, maybe not partnering, but having it right after a town hall, a city commission town hall, or right after a city manager meet the city manager meeting. I think if we try to do something standalone, we are going to use potentially a lot of city resources. Every time we ask IT to facilitate or move or do something, like we are expending city resources to do so. And if we're doing it for 3 people or 4 people to show up, should we entertain partnering or putting this right after? If the town hall on a Saturday is at 10 o'clock, we meet at 11. Is there any way, I just don't think it's realistic that we're going to have 15 or 20 people that are going to show up to the first one or the second one. Does that make sense?
Yep.
A lot of people don't know what the charter is. And Jonathan, there has been no social media advertising for this meeting on the city Facebook page. If there was, I would be the first person to share it. If we can have an event, we can start to create some engagement behind that, but we're a new committee to breathe life into saying that we're going to have the same substance that the city commission town hall is going to have. I don't think it's realistic.
No, I knew it was gonna be a staggered, learning process, so that's why Brandon asked for a report from you all to help us, and we're sort of doing it now, fleshing it out, because we gotta plan it. And we gotta think about how we wanna do it, even though we're not ready right now. I fully agree. We're just trying to figure out, can we, get off the tricycle and get on a bike? We're trying to grow ourselves. But I think we need to talk about planning it so we can talk about what support we need and what's.
Yeah. One idea too is for Brandon to join me Monday as the chairman, and maybe that's part of the Monday morning with the manager.
That would be a great idea. It's a great way to piggyback.
So I just think I'm going to use the trial and error thing. And my experiences, because I always go back to my association stuff, is that we would do these things called board certification classes where every director that gets elected has to sit for a 4-hour class. And I played with, do we do them on Mondays or Saturdays or do them virtual, whatever. And we finally got it honed down, but it wasn't until we kind of went through some of the machinations of it that we realized how we would get participation. So I don't mean this in a bad way. I have a very low bar for the first meeting because we don't know what we don't know, right? And so that's why I'm saying, I think maybe what your suggestion is, approach the commissioners or approach Alan about, can we piggyback? Can we do it at the end of it? I don't know how long those town hall things are. If it works, great. If it's clunky, we'll stop doing it. I mean, just give ourselves a little bit of grace here to see how we can at least give citizens the opportunity to participate, whether they take us up on it or not, but, at least give them the chance to do it. So I guess the takeaway is, yes, if you want me to come or anybody to your manager, what's it called? Meeting with manager?
It's Monday morning with the manager. It's the first Monday of every month. And it's at 8:30. It's in this room. It used to be in room 10, but it's moved to this room because of the construction downstairs. And, it's typically the same group of people, which is great. So, but, nowadays with everything that we have going on, and I'm always happy to do more, but if you truly want to know what's going on in your city or county in 2025, it's very easy to find that out. So
let's start with that. Then ask whoever you think is appropriate on partnering, piggybacking, doing it after whatever the town hall meetings are. I've never attended one. I don't know how long do they go?
Usually I keep it under an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
What time does, 9 o'clock?
8:30.
Sorry, the town halls or your things?
Oh, the town halls are anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. It really varies. It depends on, because again, the virtual workshop is for the commissioners to chit chat. The town hall is specifically for the public to bring their items to myself and the elected officials. And in addition, and then the Monday morning with the manager is kind of both. I provide an update on everything that's going on for the month ahead, and then I answer any questions that they have. So
My thinking is, because we're acknowledging that people don't know about what the charter is, I don't think it's realistic for us to say, give us your ideas for the charter. I think we need to do some education with the people, and it'll be a hybrid. It won't just be, this is your chance to talk to me about what, you know what I mean? So we need to educate them about the charter, and perhaps, each one a little piece of education about the charter. We can do an overall thing for 5 minutes, and then we want to focus on these elements to discuss, and then tell them what we're thinking about, or some plan thing, and then listen to feedback.
I have a different take altogether, as I usually do. I don't believe you'll get any traction from any citizen until we come out with our recommendations. I don't think we're way too mature to educate the community on what we're still getting educated on. Is just a waste of time, in my opinion. I don't think you're going to get any traction from the citizens until we have a book of recommendations to go to the charter. Then the education starts, because they're going to have to be voting on it. That's when it starts. And I may be the only one in the room that feels that way, but just from experience, you're not going to get any traction.
I agree.
I definitely am persuaded by what you said, because when you have something, it's always easier to criticize or pull apart something that's built.
True.
So I get that, but I still think it's a great idea to sort of soften up the community and let them know this is going on. And I think your participation, at the Monday morning meetings would be good. We don't always put it on you. We can
it's no pride to me. I mean, I'm happy to go as the first one to go, but believe me, if anybody else wants to go, I'm not.
Responsibility could be shared. I mean, however you want to do it. If you're comfortable going to all of them, that's fine. But if you say I'm out of town, then any one of us, who's available could go and fill that role. It's just softening them up and giving them a heads up. I just really, really believe in that. And, frankly, my experience has been, with my league experience, the more you tell citizens ahead of time something's happening, then when we have the document, they're like, oh yeah, I heard about that. And they're not just like flat-footed going, what the hell, it's this.
It certainly eliminates an excuse, to your point.
Yeah, no, it just basically lets.
Practically, you're gonna get more once you get a book.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right on point with that. And that could help, I just wanted to talk about it. I wasn't being specific about when to start. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to talk about, I wanted that kind of out.
Yeah.
Let's do this. So I'll be there with you on Monday and just make myself available. If anybody's got charter-ish type comments, it's certainly not to usurp what the purpose of your meeting is.
You can give an
Be there, be
update, too,
available.
like you've
Sure.
done at the commission meetings.
That's fine. And then, let's talk with Alan about some way to work together on the Saturday town hall meeting. Maybe it doesn't come together this Saturday, or maybe it does. I don't know. And let's at least do that and give the citizenship an opportunity to participate. And then we can see if it's working, if it's not working, and then kind of get some feedback at the next meeting and then go from there.
Sounds good.
All right.
And then let's make sure it does get on Facebook, because Brandon just said it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, an event maybe not have been created, but I know this event, amongst other things, has been promoted. I just don't know in what context.
Yeah, I think just elevate the promotion so that it hits people on the nose when they click. You don't have to look for it. It's right there in your face. Meeting, that kind of thing.
All right. We'll get on to, I guess, number 7, audience participation. We don't have anybody, do we?
Donald, is anyone online other than Mr. Henderson?
No, sir, you were seeing everybody else.
Yeah.
As far as discussion items, which I think 9 and 10 kind of roll into that, I'd love to, we have 2 things going on here. Number 1 is I doubt we're going to walk out with any sort of decisions today on any of this type of stuff, just based on how long we've been here. As I've gone through meetings, I usually find that if we're not searching for an actual outcome to be set at time certain. So are we good kind of like, let's debate this as long as we need to with some degree of flexibility, but shoot for wrapping up at 11:30 because I'm looking at it, it's like 5 till 11 right now. Is that fair? Okay, because otherwise you can just debate this thing in perpetuity.
Right.
Before we get into that, Cecile asked a great question. I think we have a general idea, but can staff just kind of crystallize for us, like, what is our current system? How does it work? Who's doing what? Like, what's the status quo? Based on the stuff that what Dr. Lee,
We're a city manager form of government. Commission management.
Yeah.
I was looking at him.
Yeah.
Commission management form of government, which means that you have a manager that executes policy that's determined by the city commission. It's not a strong mayor form. The charter sets out how it works, but there's also a prohibition for the commissioners to deal with employees directly. In other words, there are 3 employees that they have, or 3 individuals they hire: city clerk, city attorney, city manager. All of the employees that work under the city manager, or any of these 3, report to those 3 individuals and not to the city commission. So the city commission by ordinance is not to jump over the city manager, in other words, and then direct or the term is deal, but get involved with operations underneath that. So generally they set policy at city commissions, and then the 3 of us work to assist in giving them information so they can set policy. And then in particular, city manager, city clerk, they go out and execute the policy that's set.
So who does the city manager and city clerk and the city attorney answer to?
The city commission. So the city can.
As a body.
Yeah, as a body, not one, in other words, who's my client as the attorney? The city commission, not any one individual city commissioner. And under my contract, for example, I work for the city commission, I work with the city clerk and the city manager and those underneath.
And the city manager, same, and the city clerk, the same.
So they're the only 3 contracted employees. So they all 3 of them have an individual contract with the city commission. Terms of employment, hours to work, performance metrics, all that kind of stuff's there.
And so
Every other city employee, myself included, is an at-will employee at the discretion of one of these 2. And then Jonathan, by charter, serves as the personnel director. So he's, although he's certainly going to take Jan's recommendation on hiring and firing her side of staff, She effectively by charter becomes a department head when dealing with HR issues to a degree, because he's final signature on those personnel actions.
And so right now, the city commission has as a whole, not only one commissioner, which I think is good. One person, taking over, but the city commission as a whole, would evaluate the 3 employees and, conceivably has disciplinary and termination ability. And they're the ones that hire also. Correct. So it starts there, put them in place. Then the commission does the policy and says this is what we want done. And then that team does the execution and reports back to the commission, and it's sort of a free flow back and forth. This is a policy you laid out. This is the procedures we came up with to execute that policy. And if we need to tweak here and there, then that's just done.
So is it, go ahead.
But just an example that, using my office as the example, the policy, we'd like to enter into a contract. I'll use St. Andrews Marina, long-term contract, 30 years long. The city doesn't want to pay for much. The city, whatever the terms are, the 3 of us, we go off and come back with a contract that meets the policy, and then there's a vote to enter into it. And obviously, only the city commission can actually enter into a contract like that, small contracts under their purchasing authority. Each, for example, the city manager has purchasing authority. He can spend or enter into contracts or make purchases up to $100,000. But that is not in the charter. That is by action of the city commission. The county manager has a much larger purchasing authority. So that's how it's implemented.
Okay.
So our personnel policies, our purchasing policies, all of those are composed by staff, and then those are sent to commission for adoption. So they adopt those items as well, and a variety of other policies that we.
And I guess some of this delineation could be in the ordinances.
So my understanding is the charter defines the structure. The individual, Jonathan, for example, city manager, defines how he executes and how he leads his team. So that could change city manager to city manager, whether there's a scorecard approach, whether there's an attaboy, you're doing a great job, you're doing a bad job, you're doing a good job. There's no clear measurables, but the charter just simply defines who is accountable. It doesn't define responsibility or have a clear metric for accountability.
Yeah, that would be in the employment contract, correct?
Yeah, I have an employee contract and it's spelled out what the expectations are.
But that could change with each new hire. If the city commission wanted to hire a new city manager, then the employment contract should shift and the city is no longer held accountable or responsible. The accountability and responsibility then shifts based off of each new hire experience. There's no clear standard for what does great look like. That greatness can shift from person to person.
Based on their individual contract, that would
Correct.
be true.
Yes.
And so how would you all say the present format is working? I haven't heard anything bad, from what's been going on, but what is everyone's experience?
I mean, no organization is perfect. To, Dr. Lee's earlier, presentation. My personal approach to this is that when I was interviewed and hired, that, I was not going to function like a sixth commissioner. My belief is that I'm the executor of the will of the commission. That being said, because we have ward elections, each of our 4 commissioners feel very, committed to and working on behalf of their electorate of their particular wards 1 through 4. So, what I tell them is that there are some things that, we can do, just you and me working on an issue in your particular ward, smaller projects, efforts, issues that pop up. But then there's other things I'm like, okay, we've done X, Y, and Z, but at this point, in order to move forward or even right out of the gate on a request, this is something that's going to have to go to the whole commission. And so, we do have, you realize in the last 4 years, our entire commission has changed over. So, and in 2023, for the first time, I believe in the city's history, 3 of the 5 changed. We've had a mayor and a commissioner or 2 commissioners change, but in 2023, 3 of the 5 changed. 1 chose not to seek re-election and 2 incumbents were defeated. And so that's a big change. So now you look at, basically, one of our elected officials has been in for 4 years. 1 has been in 2 have been in for just over 2 years. And then 2 have been in for a couple of months or a few months. And so, but, they all have different backgrounds. Not only elected by different wards, but, they kind of have different perspectives, different professional backgrounds. And yeah, I mean, some of them have, come from the private sector and, trying to be gracious here. And it's different when you're 1 of 5 and everything. So it's, I think it's going, for the most part, very well. I'm not going to say it's perfect and that we're batting 1,000. I don't think any organization, run by humans is going to be perfect, but and we're in the middle of a very significant time of transition and challenges in our city following, Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Sally, on top of 40 to 50 years of our city not really making the proper investments or in our underground infrastructure. So all those chickens are kind of coming home to roost. We need $1 billion worth of work in our city. And, we're pretty much getting about half of that, thanks to our federal partners, our state partners, and then our resources here locally. So,
and then to put a bow on the structure, and then you've got a mayor that's elected at large 2 years at a time.
Correct.
And there are 1 vote of 5 on the commission.
Correct.
No veto authority.
Correct.
Ceremonial powers as far as showing up for the city, signing documents and things like that once the commission approves it.
Correct.
And then they chair the meetings and then
Moderate.
that's the moderator.
They moderate the meetings. I moderate the CRE meeting as the executive director, but it's the city commission, it is the mayor. And the difference is our 4 commissioners are elected for 4-year terms. So the mayor is, in a sense, almost perpetually running for office, almost like a U.S. representative in Congress, where you kind of win re-election, you start running again after the holidays. So that is a unique challenge for a 2-year term that is only for the mayor.
Do you think that makes sense?
We're going to debate that. Yeah.
In terms of the moderation of the meetings, is there any additional power? Is it just literally the housekeeping of doing it? So anyone can place agenda items on the commission meetings? There's no limitation when it comes to
The clerk controls the final agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no limitations.
So any commissioner or any,
There's a deadline, but that's it.
but that's it.
It's the same for
But
everyone.
there's no additional powers which come with being the moderator, chair of the commission. Okay.
Not in my opinion. I don't think he has.
The only restriction is the mayor can't make a motion for an item
But
unless
he can second it.
But unless he or she passes.
But there's no additional powers come with being the chair or the head of the.
Well, he could
That's
close
my
off.
opinion.
Can close off debate. To some degree, he
So is
controls.
that following Robert's rules?
Right, but there's, yeah,
Is
nothing.
that what you're saying?
Yes, it's more or less Robert's rules. To answer your question from my perspective, as far as does it work or not, I find it very comfortable coming from being county attorney for 20-some years and then being city attorney. This dates me, but when I first was county attorney, I don't believe they had gone to a manager form of government, and different commissioners were I'm the commissioner over the roads and I'm the commissioner over different departments. And when I came back in 79, 80. They were just getting out of that. And I was there when they had their first professional county. And we adopted a county manager ordinance, which is very similar to what we have here with the city manager form that's in the charter. There, the county did it by ordinance because Bay County is a non-chartered county. So the clerk was separate from the board, which is very similar. Well, the clerk was separate from they were separate from the county manager, and of course the county attorney, because the clerk, the ex officio clerk, is here. It's Mr. Kinsaw, and that's the way it's been. So there's a separation, I guess, of power between the clerk as far as the city manager and the city attorney. So that was also familiar. The chairman had all the same powers as a mayor has as far as running the meetings. It typically was rotated every year, and there would be a new chairman. But it's very similar to what Panama City has. So whether it's the perfect system, I just know I was kind of relieved at how similar it was to what we have in Bay County.
So I really want to get into discussion amongst the advisory board here as soon as practical. The last thing, Ms. Ward, can I just call you Nina?
Sure.
Okay. Are you going to be able to attend our meetings? And the reason why I ask is this might be an opportunity to ask Nina questions specifically about, I know you've had, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Okay. He's been here and been very helpful. I just didn't know if there's anything we want to ask Nina, knowing that we've got her attention about election procedures or anything like that.
Yeah, do you think, what is your perspective on the city thinking about aligning with the November election?
So as we talked about before, we've got 2 cities that already shifted their dates. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for Panama City if you keep the ward-specific voting along with the runoff. So that's something that Panama City Beach and Callaway don't do. So it was very easy to shift them. Panama City with the word-specific, I think there's only one other. Is there any? No, there's no other city that does word-specific voting, only Panama City. Springfield and Panama City Beach have residence requirements for the candidates to live in their wards, but the citizens vote at large on all of them. So that might be an option. I know that's one thing that he brought up. But as far as shifting the dates, I think, your voter turnout is obviously going to be higher. It would just come down to how you're going to do a runoff with, are you going to do a primary always and then the runoff be the general election in November? Or are you going to do away with the runoff and just have it on the November election? That is what Callaway and Panama City Beach do. They just go straight to the general and winner takes all. So there's no 50% plus one scenario.
So that thank you, Nina. And that plurality is the difference with Panama City. So Callaway is a Callaway and Panama City Beach. Whoever gets the most votes in November, it wins. So if there are 5 people running and somebody gets 21%, that's enough, that's it. Under our charter, if Panama City, and it's called, what is it called, Caroline? The primary?
Nominating primary is what.
Nominating primary election in November, then within 30 days or would have to then do the runoff election sometime around Christmas, which is not ideal to say the least.
I do not recommend it. If you want the lowest possible turnout, that's what you would do.
The other approach, not the other approach. Another approach is you would have your first election in August, and then you'd wait until November to have the runoff. There will be debate about, well, how many people really will come in August because that would align with the primary election statewide. So those are some of the decisions. If the goal is to get the most people possible out to vote, then just have to work through that. Now, the city commission can change the dates by ordinance. They cannot change to a plurality form. So they could change. So they would have to pick two dates, the date for the nominating primary and then a date for the runoff election. So
Do you want to mention like?
by ordinance, if there wasn't a charter change.
I have a question for Ms. Ward. So in the video when that was sent to us where the city had discussed this before, Mark Anderson is at one of those meetings and he talks about losing powers over the election if the election gets moved to the general election. He mentioned the qualification issues, having to follow other federal and state laws. And he also mentioned something about if you have a special election, you're on your own. Can you sort of explain what that means? Or sort of what does it mean that we'd lose power over?
Sure.
The city would lose power if we moved to the general.
Yeah. So currently, for your city elections, each city has their own canvassing board. So Jan sits on the City of Panama City Canvassing Board. Typically, I'm one of the members and then one other staff. And that's the people that just review, they review the testing of the election ballot. They review the vote by mail signatures if there's any questions. So if you move to the county, then there is no city canvassing board. The city doesn't get to decide if you want early voting or where you want your precincts. It's all up to the county. So I would just essentially take over, just like I do for the county elections. I would be running your election completely, and you'll be on the county ballot. The county canvassing board is the one that canvasses your election, and the city basically doesn't have any say-so. So, as far as, I can't remember what the second thing
He
you
talked about
asked.
the special election where he said if you have a special election, let's say, a commissioner gets removed for whatever, you're on your own is what he said. I was wondering what that meant.
I can't really speak to
Okay.
what he did.
All right.
I know I currently have a contract with the city to do your elections. So if you have them in April, I'm going to do them in April. If we put them on the county, it makes it easier for voters and easier for my office, but that's completely up to you. I'm going to do them whenever.
And the qualification would then have to follow the other elections too?
Yes. So
The
if you
city
move
couldn't
your
have a
dates.
special qualification.
Correct. If you move your dates, you're essentially following Florida statute. So your charter more or less would say, we're following Florida statute for election laws instead of having, specific.
Specific for the city.
If I could interrupt just a second.
Yeah, I'm done.
No, I believe that the main takeaway is that the city has a contract with the supervisor of elections to run the elections. The city doesn't have to have a contract with the supervisor of elections. It could run its own elections, and in the past, it has run its own elections. So it's not a charter requirement, it's not an ordinance requirement, it's just a common sense thing that the city has a contract with an independent party that knows how to run elections.
Yeah, statutorily, I am required to provide you with equipment and precinct registers. So I can print you out a list of voters and you can go run your own election. But the city's chosen to just be under contract with my office where we just take care of the whole process. So we qualify your candidates. We become the qualifying officer, not the city clerk. We handle all the finance reports that goes along with campaigns and all of that.
So what has to be in the charter, Devin, as far as elections?
What's in the charter? I mean, that's it, right?
I mean, the commission can change dates by ordinance.
Right.
Right.
I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that everyone understood that the state of Florida, there's a statute that gives that ability to the commission. So even if the dates for the election is in the charter, the commission can supersede that.
Because there's a state statute.
Because there's a state statute that
And
gives
so
it to
that
the
brings me
commission.
back to what exactly has to be in the charter. Is it just
Terms
that
of
we have an
office.
For
election?
the plurality versus the runoff.
That's it, morality,
Correct.
that's it.
So even if we define when the election is going to be, the city commission can just say, we're not going to do that?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And Nevin and I had, I don't know if we want to get in that conversation through emails about that the commission can trump the charter in a bunch of cases.
Yeah.
Not only does state statute get to trump it or a federal statute, the commission could do that as well.
I believe you. I mean,
Yeah. So,
In some areas. So
and
that was one of my first questions when I got, do we even need a charter? Well, yeah, you gotta have one.
but
A bold advisory board.
What are we doing?
Charter.
Yep.
all right, can we Can we do this? Selfishly, I feel like we're at the tail end of our third meeting as a board. We haven't even discussed amongst ourselves at all on any of this stuff. And so I'm happy if somebody wants to start, I can call on somebody. I know Brandon, you did some polling online. Ron, you had started going down a line of thoughts, and I said to reserve it. So that's not lost to me. I have that written down. So, I mean, Ron, you can start wherever you want. I guess I'll call.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I would take it by section almost if we were going to go through it. So the first one is the form of government. And if we can just limit conversations to that, I'm glad to start. I think what we have now works. I'm one of those that believe that the commission has budget authority and policy authority, and that's it. Everything else is left to the city manager and the staff. That's basically what we have now, and I think it works. Now, that's the only, as an elected official, once upon a time, that's what I'm used to. So, I can be swayed, but I think that works fine with what we have as a commission manager plan, or however you want to say it. I think that works fine.
So, I mean, I like to ask questions and they're not loaded at all. I mean, you lived that system for a long time. At no point, you didn't get frustrated with it. You weren't saying, hey, I kind of wish I had more say in this stuff. You ultimately ended up being pretty content with it?
Yes, the only thing that I've heard in here that was a little bit surprising to me is when I was chairman of the school board, I had authority over the agenda. If the superintendent and I agreed that it was not ready to be on the agenda, or even if I felt it was not ready for the agenda, it didn't get on the agenda. That was the chairman and the school board. The chairman did move around. I was just pleasurable to serve more than once, but the chairman or the mayor in this course had agenda authority to say, that we're not ready for that, or whatever. Other than that, it worked well for my service. This type of thing. It keeps the board members from being in the day-to-day operation. They should not, in my humble opinion. That is the city manager and only the city manager.
Is it this, again, not loaded, truly just, is it the same or different because the school board superintendent is basically like a strong mayor? Or you think it's?
Yeah, but it doesn't vote. So we have, the school board has 5 members and the superintendent. So the superintendent brings recommendations, all that, and is in charge. It's a different system.
Right.
But the superintendent doesn't. So the superintendent could bring a plan. Well, just like Jonathan, he could bring a plan. And the 5 members of the board, or the majority of the board say,
The superintendent functions a lot more like a city manager.
Yeah.
And that's situation.
That's correct. It's just an elected city manager. It's a different, the concept's the same, but it's just a little bit different.
I would just add the challenge from my standpoint, and, is that, and I always want to look at it from the elected official standpoint as well. If there does need to be some level of balance, because if they feel like they don't have any influence over the process and the direction of the city, then, which is what they were sent by the citizens to do, to kind of help lead the city and be a part of it. And they're not doing what they feel like their constituents want, and they're not getting that done, then the constituents will respond by kind of voting them out. So there is kind of that balance there, and especially with ward voting, because they're there to represent, the needs and the desires, and they, in theory, should have the finger on the of their respective, I keep saying district, but it's ward. That's one thing that came up, by the way, that I heard is ward is kind of outdated. Maybe the charter review committee should consider district. I don't know. I think everyone else calls them districts in the city or in the county. Right?
Not everybody.
Who else calls them wards?
Springfield has wards.
Springfield has wards.
Beach calls wards too.
Brandon, what have you heard?
I got a lot of feedback that a lot of folks do not want to change from the current structure. They feel that representation is good from their commissioners. They do feel that when you look at the hierarchy, who should have the hardest job in our city? Is that the mayor? And he should be held accountable to performing to that hardest job, or is that the city manager? And in our structure, the hardest job in our structure is the city manager's job. I think we're looking at city manager responsibilities, and I think that the League of Cities mentioned 50% of cities say that the clerk falls under the city manager. In a normal city about our size, the city manager is the CEO. That he answers to the board, which is the 5 commissioners, right? So they help assist with vision. They get vision from their wards, from their constituents. As CEO, he also has to participate in that vision, but his departments are the COOs and they execute right at his direction. So I don't see value in changing away from that structure. We're not a city of Charlotte. I'm actually in Charlotte right now. We're not city of Charlotte size, right? And it is working. I think it can work better. And I think the communication is getting better from the city. And like I said, 75% of the people that we polled said that they don't want to make a change from the current structure. Now, that might mean we have a 5th ward. We might need to talk about that. That turns into 5 commissioners and 1 mayor. But I wouldn't recommend making a change from the current structure.
And I'll just add, so I'm in charge of the budget, but Ms. Smith is in charge of the finances. So I think that's a really good checks and balances too, because, you know, as city manager, like I don't even know how to initiate a check request. But if any cash goes out of the city, you know, you didn't just have one siloed department being able to do it. So, and she does ask questions.
Well, when you say in charge of the budget, you're in charge of maintaining that we are in good fiscal standing, but you don't adopt the budget. The city commission does that.
Well, we draft it, we present it, and ultimately it's adopted, but yes.
Okay.
The staff that drafts the budget reports to me.
Brandon, what else have you found?
In regards to just the structure?
Yeah, I mean, you had several, I thought when you were going through it with Dr. Lee, you had several examples of feedback that you've gotten. So I just want to make sure I wasn't cutting you short.
Yeah, Ward 2, so I got a lot of feedback from Ward 1 and Ward 2. Ward 2 did not want to, the majority of the feedback was they didn't want at-large commissioners. I know there was a discussion at a city commissioner meeting several months ago. A lady approached the podium asking for at-large voting, where everybody in the city would be able to vote for every candidate in each ward, but the requirements would be that that candidate has to live specifically in that ward. And I think I heard that Springfield and maybe Callaway is that way. They do at-large voting. Ward 2, the feedback I'm getting from them is they don't feel that they would have proper representation if the entire city got to vote for who, even if their candidate lived in their ward. Anybody could live in the ward specifically. They didn't feel that they would get great representation if we did at-large voting.
You know which wards show out in higher numbers? I'm putting up a spot here.
We can get that.
Ward 1.
Last election, it was Ward 1 overwhelming.
That's kind of what I figured. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are we the only single-member districts? Okay, the only single-member district city in Bay County, at least, is Panama City. All the others are at large.
I believe, Springfield, Callaway, and Panama City Beach have wards for their commissioners, but the voters vote at large.
And just so we know our constraints, Evan, we have to have wards. I'm not suggesting we don't. I'm just saying, by law, do we have to have wards?
Well, it could be district. I mean,
you can just, can you have 5 people from anywhere in the city at any time and everybody votes on all the people?
We have a federal court order.
well, but by statute.
Oh, by statute. No.
Just
Yes.
requires.
Either way.
So they could all live in the cove. Is
I
that?
don't think there's any appetite. I'm just kind of curious because to Ron's point, like what are our
By
constraints here?
statute, yes, of course, yeah.
So
So we have to have districts.
apparently, yeah, it's a great question. We're going to look into it.
We don't need to expend time on it.
Yeah,
If you're saying there's a court order, I'm not trying to put something, I'm not even really serious about this. I'm just trying to get where the lines of.
I don't recall there being a statutory requirement to have 4 districts or 4 wards.
There's not. So Lynn Haven does not have districts.
Okay,
The beach doesn't have districts. They're just all at large.
Okay.
If there were no districts, there would be no segregated representation. There could be no argument that anybody would be less represented than anybody else across the entire city.
And just so the other board members know, a lot of times I ask questions and there's not an agenda here. I promise you, it's more so about me figuring out where the parameters are. Like I like to, if we're going to define a line, I like to know where the line, when we've crossed the line.
Right.
And so, anyways, so JP, what do you think? Not about that, just Ron, what's it Ron said, Brandon said, that type of stuff.
Right, just about section 13, I agree that I think that it's the good system for the best of times and the worst of times. I think the powers are divided so that whatever happens in the next 20 or 30 years, no matter who's in those seats, the power will be divided enough to where we won't run into a problem. I think it's a good system. I think it's working, and I think we're good.
And one thing that Dr. Lee said that struck a chord was that we're not doing it for now, we're doing it for years down the line. And our form of government will work years down the line. Whoever is the manager and whoever is the commission, it'll work. So it has worked.
Yeah, I think we also need to look at all the details for like when the ship is gonna run ashore, like how do you correct it? All of those details really matter because when things due to personality or whatever political issues, people, are not agreeing with each other and there's a process to kind of work it out, then we need to make sure that those things are placed in there,
So one of the specifics, and Ron, you mentioned this, was also who sets the agenda. You said the one thing that kind of seemed a little bit off was that the
mayor doesn't have any agenda authority.
Well, they do. They can add something day of too. They can put it to a vote to alter the agenda on the meetings.
Individually, I think.
Individually, they have. So
All commissioners have that.
correct. So I mean, I just want to be clear, like there's a section in our agenda, it's additions, deletions, modifications, and a commissioner or the mayor could put something forward and then it goes to a roll call vote to add it to the agenda.
But that's just in the rules of participation. It's not in the charter.
Hey guys, I got to jump off. I do have one more thing. The other thing that was on my list is I've gotten innumerable requests that we transition the mayor 2-year cycle to a mayor 4-year cycle. 4-year voting terms. They've the information I've received, all the feedback I've received is that they are a 5th commissioner or they are a separate commissioner. They don't get any extra voting rights. Yeah, they get to lead the meeting. Their election term should be just as long as the represented officials in each ward for the commissioners.
And I have some thoughts about term limits and the number and apportionment that for another time, just in terms of the structure.
I got to go. I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Brian. Do we want to talk about that, the 4-year term for mayor? Anything else about the mayor position?
I was thinking the same thing. It seemed a little bit duplicative and hard on the mayor to have to keep running every two years, and you get the 4-year, you can actually get some vision going and get a project.
My thought about it is that we move it to 4, but we establish term limits. That would be my suggestion.
All right, let's talk about that. What would the term limit be?
I think a 2-term limit so that the mayor could serve for 8 years at a time, allow for that rotation of power, make sure that someone doesn't stay in there for a decade or plus, allow new people to come in, allow the power again to cycle through to avoid any of that problem. So we're extending the time that they're allowed to be in there, but we're limiting it to 8
Are you
years.
just talking about the mayor or all the commissioners?
For just for the mayor, or at least for now. I haven't.
So the mayor, the person who's the mayor could rotate off mayor and become a regular commissioner.
There could, yes. Just my thought process.
If I may ask a question, Mr. Chairman, the only question I have with that is if the mayor has no really additional authority, why would you only limit that to the mayor?
That's true. I mean, I'd be willing to listen to a term limit for commissioners as well. Just in terms of what we're talking about the mayor. I think that helps to avoid someone staying on the commission for forever.
I have a comment if you'd care to hear it.
Please.
I think term limits, I'm not sure 2 terms is sufficient. It really takes them like 2 years just to figure out what's going on. So that's really only giving them 6 years to actually serve. So maybe 3 terms would be better.
So, Nevin, I'm going to pick on you since you have longevity. Has that been an issue? I do know long ago we had mayors that served for, I think Scott Clemens was mayor for a long, long time, right?
30 years?
Jerry. And then Rudnicki was mayor 12 years, something like that. and we've had some very short tenured mayors in there as well. And then I just don't know the history of the commissioners. I don't know, have we had commissioners that have served for decades, or is this a solution looking for a problem?
Bill Rader served for 16.
There is, as far as the history, yes, I think Jerry Clemens served for over 20 years. And then Mayor Brudnicki served for 12 years or so. As far as commissioners go, I know that Commissioner Rader served,
I think there was 16.
He did 16 years. So I don't know if that's a problem or just shows they're doing a good job and the voters wanted them to run again. I don't know, but there has been a history of some that have been in office quite a while. And then there's a history of some that.
I mean, the status quo is we've had nobody there more than 4 years. right now.
That had been in office and got beat, had been in office for 14 years, 16 years, and then somebody ran and
All three of those
defeated them.
were all
So
defeated.
Billy Rader ran unopposed, and the only time he was opposed was when he was
His very first election.
Yeah, so he never faced a challenger on a re-election until his last one.
So
Jerry Clemens was also defeated.
4 of the 5 current board members all defeated incumbents. So.
Yeah, I'm not bringing that point up, JP, to like argue against you. I'm just trying to get a context for things.
Jonathan and I have discussed this a lot about term limits, and we look at Tallahassee a lot and see how term limits have kind of hurt Tallahassee to a degree. Because you've got legislators now that say my biggest challenge in Tallahassee is defeating bad legislation from freshman senators or representatives. So there is that side of it. Term limits do empower professional staff. So it empowered Jonathan and Jan and Nevin to a degree because of that constant turnover. So it just those some consequences. I don't believe I'm taking a position on this either way. But just like the election dates, like your elections are going to cost the candidates more because you're buying advertisement in a field where national and state elections are happening too. So there's all those different third and fourth order effects just to kind of be aware of.
I will say one of the things, and kind of going off on a different subject, that strikes me as odd, just based on my community association background, is the lack of notice on an agenda. Like all of my associations have to post their agenda 48 hours in advance, and there's really no reasonable mechanism to post something on the agenda or add something to the agenda at the very last minute. And I guess Florida statute doesn't have the same thing for municipalities. We can bring something up.
if there's a regular meeting, which there are twice a month, you're not required by law to even have an agenda, is last time I looked at it. That's not the practice though. And we have rules of procedure that talk about the agenda formation and then also on how to run a meeting. If you have a special meeting, you have to give notice not only of the meeting, but of the topic that will be discussed and potentially voted on at the meeting. But as far as a regular meeting, that's why things can be added to the agenda right there at the meeting and can be voted on.
I mean, I will say, and I'm thinking out loud, I'm not suggesting we do this, but I think it is a very good constraint because the principle is that the person sees the agenda and decides if they want to attend the meeting or not. They look ahead, they see what's going to be on there. Oh, they're not talking about my issue today, so off they go. Whereas if there is no agenda or there could be something added at the very beginning of the meeting, how does a citizen know if it's something that they want to participate in or not?
Agreed.
So it's just throwing that out there.
Just real quick, Attorney General opinions and case law discuss the fact that if there are 2 regular meetings, that the citizen just needs to be there if they want to know what's going on. That's their discussion. And I'm not saying that's practical or in today's world where, and remember, those are old cases and old Attorney General opinions.
That was old to me.
Well, before
We're challenged.
there was the internet and all where you can check the agenda right before, the day before the meeting. But that's the logic behind regular meetings versus a special.
I agree with you. But you need to at least give the appearance of this is what we're going to do so people know whether they want to take off or participate or whatever arrangements they need to do.
Ron looks like the mouse on the wheels running pretty hard. What you got?
No, I'm just thinking about the agendas. I've been to some city commission meetings and I only come when there's something on there I want to talk about. Yeah.
But you don't know.
Because it's up to Jonathan to run the city. I have all faith in Jonathan. So it's just agenda items that I need to talk about. I don't need to go unless there's something that I want to talk about.
Yeah, but the flip side would be you don't know if they're going to add something.
Well, that's true.
you
If
wanna
they
talk about in the
change
last
it,
minute,
then,
right?
Which has happened before, but
I mean, if that's a concern, I mean, I'm assuming that y'all could, Mr. Chairman, add in the charter that, after an agenda is published, it requires a supermajority of 4/5 vote to add anything, so that you don't just have 3 commissioners adding something at the last minute. That could be, if that's kind of a buffer you want to put in there you wouldn't want to completely tie their hands because there always are, there always is the potential for extraordinary circumstances to add something to an agenda, or it could be something getting added that's benign. That's just a thought. I don't know if what other, charters are out there that have that type of restriction.
We could look at that.
Yeah.
We could also, if we start coming up with these fine-tuned questions, send it to the Dr. Lee again. You may have a faster way of finding out what the.
I mean, I did not walk into this meeting wanting to discuss notices. It's just kind of who sets the agenda and how that works and whatever. And I'm thinking through all the board meetings that I've sat through. And I mean, maybe not thousands, but certainly hundreds. And I understand there's a dynamic nature of a city and things come up at the last minute. But on the other hand, like what really does come up with 48 hours notice or 72 hours notice? Like there's a degree of planning and foresight. You're a massive city with 50,000 people to a certain extent. It's like we have to balance between making sure that there's enough discretion for the commission to make decisions that come up on the fly. But it's also like, your citizens have a right to see how the sausage is made. And I 100% agree with you that the Attorney General opinion says it's incumbent on the citizens to come to every meeting. And they're way smarter than I am. It just seems like that's not perhaps the best policy. But anyways, I don't know, bringing something up. I don't know if I want to.
And it's odd because I work close enough to where they usually have the meetings that if I'm listening and something comes up, I have to know to go over there. It's
I wasn't planning to come to this meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Anyways, so JP.
No, just in terms of, it seems like the board has an agreement on just the general structure. Here is that, am I correct in that assessment about keeping the president?
Yeah, I'm not hearing any appetite.
Check off.
So just just in terms of where we are at the beginning of what we were talking about today, just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I am hearing there might be some fine tuning, but as far as a dynamic shift to a strong mayor or commission only system or something like that, no, there doesn't seem to be any appetite for that. I'm happy to keep discussing. I told you guys we'd wrap up at 11:30, so I'm not trying to rush anybody out. Happy to hear other comments.
I think on the elections, I'm just, there are pros and cons to moving them to get more participation, but then, I think we need to tread carefully on that. I'd definitely support more participation.
So if I can suggest this for our next meeting, let's think about, are there any refinements or details to the commission manager system that we'd like to incorporate into the charter? Things like who sets the agenda. I'll give some more thoughts of whether I want to make an actual push for this notice thing or not. Things like that. And then number 2 would be the election structure. We can actually debate the term limits and I don't know if there's any discussion about the number of wards or.
Yeah, that's in the next section.
Yeah. And so JP, I think you rattled off like 3 or 4 things like apportionment, term limits, something else too. What were they?
My main thinking is, and let me just explain this real quick. We're kind of in an in-between point. I'm looking ahead to the next census and I'm looking ahead to the next reapportionment. I'm thinking about the growth of the city. And what we're going to do in the charter, where we're going to set a number, I was trying to come up with an idea of something where this could become automatic to where we instruct the commission on what that is going to be. Because I know that, sort of echoing what Brandon said, everyone likes their representation and the connection that they have. And if the city continues to grow, it's going to dilute each of the voter representation. But I think it's too early to pull the trigger on adding an additional ward right now. Because, the numbers I have, roughly everyone has 1,200 voters per ward, right? And trying to keep, but having come up with a system and maybe some assistance there on some type of apportionment method, right? Because we're going to set the structure and the commission will have to worry about that 6-7 years from now. Because I think I care more about that apportionment and keeping our apportionment the way we have it now than sort of the particulars about anything else.
You know, do those numbers sound right? About 8,000?
I
Can you
don't,
check?
I
Can
can.
you
So that's by
I think I sent
population,
you
that's
that
not by
the other
voter,
day.
but in 2022,
I don't
you know, you had
believe
Ward
that's
1 with 8,400, Ward 2 had 7,800 roughly.
I'd
Ward
like to
3,
get the information on the actual voters, the eligible voters, and then also, who is actually voting. I guess those are two different questions.
You have to form the districts by population. You can't do it by voters.
I understand,
Okay.
but I'm still would like that
Okay,
information.
yeah.
I agree 100% of the spirit of that. I think it's a very challenging calculation to formulate that. I think you can accomplish the same thing by mandating a charter review every so many years.
Also,
Like
something.
5 years, 10 years, whatever. I think you
Something we
can
need to
solve
talk
that
about.
same problem
Something we need
with
to
that
talk about.
mechanism.
Yes.
It's a little bit cleaner.
Right.
I just want to be clear, you're required to reapportion every 10 years, right after the census. You have to do it within 2 years of the census.
Right, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about adding seats.
Oh, yeah.
You get to, right, that would be up to the.
Yeah.
I agree.
But from my perspective is, how are you going to get that number to reapportion to the next district? Because the only concrete information you have is from the census, which is every 10 years. Other than the voters, which is, you're representing, the census is representing population, not voters, so.
There's some discussion this year from the governor about trying to force a
Like a
Midterm.
mid-cycle, yeah.
midterm or mid-cycle census, so that could impact.
The challenge with just adding one ward is that it creates an even number. And then you got to kind of figure out that dynamic of
Yes.
how do you square that circle.
Lose his vote.
Hmm?
The mayor could lose his voting.
Oh, could, but you have to answer that question. I mean, you know, do they have
Don't want to do that.
Trump, like a, not super majority, but do they have the ultimate say? Can they break ties? But you have to solve for that problem too.
Well, I think Robert's Rules of Order, having grown up Presbyterian, basically what you could do if you had 6, the mayor being number 6, is he or she only votes to force a tie or break a tie. Those only two reasons. Force a tie, which kills the motion, or to break a tie.
I think what I heard in this discussion, if you'd like us to look, is any other city tried to think into the future that if a certain threshold is reached, that a new district is formed?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So we'll look and see if anybody has tried to do that prospectively in the charter. I think it'd be difficult to do. I'm not
Right,
saying
I
it's
understand.
impossible to do, but we can look and see if that's been done.
Are there any other things? Go.
Ignorant question. Other than the census, how do you figure out who lives in the city and who doesn't?
That's the big meeting.
We get a population estimate from the state of Florida every year for like how they split up the state shared revenues and that and those kind of things. So I think it's the Department of Economic.
Out of university.
Where they get that? Is that guesses from them?
No, that's what it used to be, but it's something different now. But it's one of the state agencies that make the estimates for the entire state.
And in the back of my mind is, as the city grows, it's gonna be in North Panama City. By land anyway, you know? And so whenever that trigger comes, and I agree with JP, there might need to be a mechanism to pull that trigger in the charter. I don't know. It'll go be hard to do. But,
Because basically I'm thinking Congress before the Reapportionment Act of 1929. That's what my thinking is.
other than that, you have a charter review connected to the census.
Or you do it, that would be the other way to do it.
Seal, what else?
I think that's a good amount of stuff to focus on.
So just to put a bow on this, we'll come in with the next meeting on discussions over refining the existing system, whether we need to make any clarification to city manager role, mayor role, anything like that. But overall, there's no appetite to change the commission manager structure. Also, a more detailed discussion on the actual election procedures. Do we want to consider putting when the election should be in the charter? How runoffs procedures works? Is it a majority, plurality, things like that? And then also a degree of consideration as to how we want to address future growth in the city, the expansion of wards, things like that. Is there anything else? And we're not, as Ron told in one of the meetings, it's a bit of a living document until we present it to the commission. Is there anything else that we want to be prepared to be discussed?
I think if you tackle the rest of Article 2, we'll be here a while. Because that's all those things.
That's all those things, yeah.
Well, I mean, the hope would be at the next meeting is going to go straight into debate or discussion.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's not, I don't, and maybe we get, so then that's the next point. Just to be clear with staff, what information do we need from them, want from them to help make this discussion more productive in a couple weeks?
Well, we'll look at the question of perspective.
Okay.
As far as just trying to do a quick review of other
Okay.
charters.
And then Cecile, did you have Nina working on, y'all?
Yeah, Nina was gonna get,
Yeah, and I see where I sent Jonathan the numbers, but I have our reports are just active voters, so they're not gonna really line up for.
Not gonna have
like,
census data.
Census, yeah. But currently I can give you the numbers by ward if that's what you're wanting.
yes.
And participation in the last election by ward?
I can
I
definitely.
think you already sent
Yeah.
that, actually.
Active voters are what, who voted two or how, what?
Just people that are actively registered.
I do know your numbers are accurate, though, and she could probably verify. Wards 2 and 4 are much smaller voter-wise than wards 1 and 3,
Yeah, so
correct?
Ward 1, we're sitting at 6537. Ward 2 is 4965. Ward 3 is 7430. And Ward 4 is 4995.
And yes, to your point, there's now annexation over in the west part of Ward 3 and the north part of Ward 4 is really the only real growth. There's not a ton of property we developed in Panama City proper, not to say there's not any. So yes, the overwhelming majority of the growth in our city will be in Panama City North, which as of today will have a great effect on Ward 3, which is, I think, why you've seen that growth. It's 1,000 ahead of even the second largest, which is Ward 1 at 6,500.
And it's double the landmass of the original Panama City. So I mean, it's like Alaska on a map, you know, it's not to scale.
Not to scale.
Scale. Maybe not a question for today. I guess overall, from a policy standpoint, is there an appetite for the city to continue to just annex anybody who's interested in being part of the city in that direction? Do we know? Is that a commission discussion?
They have to approve it.
Well, I'll give you just real quick. To annex, you have to be able to provide urban services, and you have to be contiguous. Contiguous, thank you. Ron knows. You have to be contiguous. You can't create an enclave or a pocket. Anyway, so there are some standards under the law on how you annex. Provided it meets those standards, our current board has not shied away from annexing anybody who wants to come in.
Okay. All right. Any other directives for staff or other officials that they can help us with the next meeting? Okay. All right, so we'll be back on, what is it, October 25th, 6th, something like that?
23rd.
23rd? All right.
I did want to highlight, and I don't know if anything's changed with Ms. Smith, but her and I are actually both out November 20th. Is that still the same for you, ma'am? So, and that's kind of the week before Thanksgiving. Given the big jump from November 20th to January 22nd, I was just going to see if the board would be willing to consider moving that middle meeting to December 4th. And not be the week before or after Thanksgiving, just a thought.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, y'all can certainly proceed, but I don't know if, Mr. Jones can, but I just think,
Take minutes, he can take minutes.
so. Or again, just move the November 20th to December 4th, and then that does put the meeting, in between October 3rd and January 4th, maybe a little bit more in the middle, but because you don't have anything planned in December right now, that's just a thought.
So what would the Thursday be?
It would be December 4th.
Yeah, so you're suggesting moving the 20th, November 20th to December 4th?
Yeah, and I apologize. We should have looked at our calendars as well because we knew at the last meeting that her and I both were going to be unavailable that week.
JP, are you good with that?
Yep, that works for me.
Ron?
Let me double check.
Be at the ICMA conference.
That's fine.
Okay. That's good with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ron, are you good with that?
I can be.
I mean, I'm not gonna ask you.
No, y'all
You
can
got
do
every right to
without
say
me,
no.
but we'll, yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, no slight to say, I'd rather have you there than staff there, frankly. Like, seriously. So, we've already got,
And then the only other question is, I don't know if y'all want to stick with starting at noon with lunch at 11:30, or do you like the morning time?
The days we have it, I can't be here.
Except during lunch. Okay, great.
I'm gonna already miss some court in the afternoon, but.
Ron, it is purely your call.
I'm okay. I'll do some rearranging.
All right, well, let's move our meeting from November 20th to the same time on December 4th. And anything else before we adjourn?
I think y'all voted on that last time, Mr. Chairman, on the
No.
date, so it's probably.
About the adjournment, you mean? Or, on the meeting date?
Yeah. No, y'all voted to establish the dates.
I moved to change the meeting date to December 4th.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, there we go. So that's approved. Anything else before the next, before we adjourn? Again, staff, thank you guys for preparing the Legal Cities things. I think that seriously, honestly, like, I didn't have crazy high hopes. It was kind of interesting to see what they had to say, but for real, it was very, very helpful. It really, really was. And then I appreciate you guys as a board kind of getting educated on this stuff and reaching out to people. So far, so good. All right. I think Ron moved to adjourn. JP said.
Thank you.